All right, everyone, welcome back to Detroit Gamesters. It's me, Shamir, and I'm here with Arjun. It's been a really hectic 2 weeks in gaming, at least to me. A lot of news for us to catch up with. So, yeah, Arjun, where do you want to start?
Yeah, there's been quite a bit going on, honestly. A lot of news, especially today, and specifically when we're recording on February 25th. But I kind of want to start with the state of play. This was a pretty meaty, juicy, big for Sony fans, 40 minutes long with a lot of game announcements. And I kind of want to dive into this a bit first because I think some people had some high expectations for what the state of play could have been. And I think it overall, like, I just want to start by giving a grade to this before I do a deep dive. And I want to give this, I think, for me specifically, I feel like it spoke to me a bit. And it's somewhere between a B minus and a B. I kind of like it sits there. I kind of want to ask you too, first of all, what's your overall impressions? And maybe we can deep dive into the games a bit here. So, like, what do you think? So, would you rank this?
Yeah, I think this is, a lot of times you agree and a lot of times, but this is probably something we're going to disagree more strongly on because I was pretty disappointed by the state of play. So there'll be a lot for us
Wow.
to talk about. But
Sony
I,
hater.
I hate a little bit, but I originally was thinking this is probably me being a little over. Like I was even thinking like a D, but honestly, I'd probably give it like a C minus.
Okay.
So I mean, there was some good in there, but I just feel like with the moment of where gaming is at, and also since this is the beginning of the year, and just following up from the pretty epic showcase that was Microsoft, and the fact that we have Switch 2, around on the horizon. I just felt like I needed more, and I know I'm gonna get that later, but it just wasn't enough for me.
No, that's absolutely fair. Again, these games spoke to me in a way that I haven't seen a showcase really speak to me. There's normally like one or two games, and I'm like, okay, I like this, but I'm not super excited. And again, from what I've said in the past, games are exciting me more than actual hardware. So I want to start off with a couple of games. There's some really big things that were announced here. Some new games, some existing games with new trailers. So let me start with that first. I was kind of shocked. Like they started off, I think, with Shinobi Art of Vengeance, which is coming out this year in August. Looks great to me. The art style, I love it. I love the how they kind of had this mashup with the music. I've never played any of the older Shinobi games. I think Shinobi 3 is probably the most popular, I think people most talk about. But to me, this platformer, side scrolling kind of game is really up my alley now, especially because I've been playing games portably. And I think this was great that, again, these IP are being revived by Sega. So it's just like, it's nice to see that something's finally coming to fruition. I know they announced like 5 or 6 games last year. But what do you think about Shinobi?
Yeah, I guess I just don't really know anything about Shinobi, so it's hard for me to get hyped. It looks good, honestly. The trailer looks great. I can't really knock on the game. I'm just not like a big Shinobi person, so I can't get like hyped from it when it comes to that perspective. And to me, I just feel like it was kind of awkward timing for me because there's just been such a big moment with Ninja Gaiden. And, I'm a massive Ninja Gaiden fan, so I will admit I'm probably pretty biased with this. But I'm like, all right, we just got Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, which was a banger. Ninja Gaiden 2, Ninja Gaiden 4 coming out later in the year, and they even had that side-scrolling Ninja Gaiden. So I'm sure there's probably people who have played the older like Ninja Gaidens and the Shinobi, and like they'll be able to point out the differences between them. But I'll be honest, I really don't. So
Yeah.
I'll see. This is one of those games to me. Like it looks good. I'll wait to see what the review score is like, and if it's good, I'll try it out. I think I was reading that it's the team that made Streets of Rage 4,
Yes.
and I mean that game was good,
Yeah,
right?
it was a
People love
great
that
game.
game, and
I
I know
loved
me and
it.
you played that a little bit. I didn't get to beat it, so I think it's going to be an objectively good game. I just didn't feel the hype for it as
Yeah,
much.
that's fair. I think, like, what some people have been saying, or maybe I'm just saying it, is the year of the ninja, right? With Ninja Gaiden coming out. And I think maybe there'll be some competition between the two games that are coming out that are very similar in nature. But I think overall, I'm excited to see where they take this franchise, and if it sells well, could they spawn more sequels? It would be nice to see some of these revivals aren't just a one-shot entry into bringing it back into the modern or contemporary side of things. So I think again, overall, I'm looking forward to that. But let's talk about a game that might be really up your alley that you've been waiting for quite a while. I think you've been waiting for Days Gone remastered.
Oh my
I think
god,
that's
you know
a
me so well.
I think it's a banger.
I remember when I was texting you about this, and then you were saying, "Oh yeah, Days Gone, bro." You were excited, and I was like, "Man, I don't know if you're joking with me or not." But like, I feel like when I saw that, like, if there was some hype I was getting from this, I was like, "Oh my god, Sony, this is like." the exact amalgamation of my complaints. Like, if you don't have anything going on, you're just padding things out with these remasters, which were like, if we're gonna call it how it is, like on Xbox, you would be getting that for free. You would getting the upscaling. You would have it on Game Pass, honestly. But outside of that, like, you wouldn't even have to pay a $10 fee. I will give it to Sony. Like, I am happy that they are still trying to make Days Gone a thing, in a way, at least to try and make some money off of it. And I am happy that it's only a $10, upgrade fee, and at least there's a new mode there, so it doesn't seem like the $10 will be worthless. I think for people who really enjoyed Days Gone, that's going to be huge. But I mean, honestly, like, it just feels a little tone deaf to me as well. Like, we've been talking about how they canceled, that studio's games. They never gave them a shot for Days Gone 2, and it's like, now after so many years, you're just gonna like release a remastered, and it's not just a remastered. Like, there's a new mode too. It's just, it's like, what are you doing with this franchise? Like, how do you want me to feel about Days Gone?
Yeah, it's interesting you say this because they're definitely doing this. One of those things where, like, hey, this was low hanging fruit. We want to make some money. Apparently, it's charting the charts for PSN. So, like, this is like one of the highest pre-ordered games now in the last couple of weeks, which is really weird. Yeah, that means there's.
Well, our barber, he was actually telling me that he was playing Days Gone and he was playing like the old version. And I don't know, we got into a little bit of argument because he was dead set that the new Days Gone is like a full remake.
No,
and I was like, dude, it's not a remake, it's a remaster. And he was like, no, he was like, I went on the PSN store and it was a full price game, so it's a remake.
See, this is how you trick people, right? And this is smart marketing by Sony, because I think this is asinine. I think the $10 charge, at first I thought the same thing. I said, hey, maybe this is fair. You're adding some new content. Most of the content upgrades you're getting are already there on PC. The only thing that's literally new,
know that, actually.
The only thing that's literally new is that one new arcade mode, which you're really going to charge me $10 for this.
Yeah, they probably didn't put in that much like effort. And the thing is, like, didn't we get that God of War Valhalla, that expansion for free?
For free.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you're telling me you can't just add this, which, and okay, again, it's not even, dude, it's all the PC updates, which really now they're porting over just VRR support. I don't even think they're upscaling the game that much more on the PlayStation. So it's just, you're right, it is tone deaf, and it's almost like, how do you want me to feel about this?
I'm kind of hoping, fingers crossed, with me as someone who's trying to make his own creative project happen. I think there was a lot of promising things in Days Gone, and obviously it has a massive cult following.
Yeah,
and
it really does.
And I think it actually did pretty good numbers, and I would be curious if Days Gone Remastered, well, Days Gone in the first place is doing pretty good numbers, and it's already doing a lot of pre-orders. Game's not even out yet. I wonder if Sony would reconsider, and I wonder if they would allow like a Days Gone 2 now.
Yeah, it's very possible, because think about it. This is all coming out at the most funniest time, throughout their software development lifecycle. You literally cancel. They rebranded their name too, right?
Did they?
Or maybe it's Ben, but I forget. Can you check? So they canceled the current game, which was a stupid live service thing. If a lot of people end up pre-ordering this, and maybe it doesn't hit 1 million sales, maybe, but if it hit like 500,000, maybe you consider letting them do another Days Gone game. Like, I just don't understand.
Yeah. So it was a curious move, but I'm overall happy at the move. Like, I get frustrated, like, this is what Sony does, but it makes them money, it makes people happy, and at least it's bringing more attention to Days Gone. But especially this far into the generation, I'm like, man, can we really get past these remasters? Like, when it's in the first year or two, like, it doesn't seem as egregious, because it's a new console. People like maybe didn't buy the new console yet, and they're kind of like, strapping the sides. But like at this point, it's like, come on, we're so far in the cycle.
That too. Like, you're basically telling me again, these games, which all released at the end of the PS4 life cycle, hey, we don't have a whole lot for PS5. Consider this a PS5 game now, which it natively really isn't. And that pisses me off. And it's like, I don't know. The more I think about this, I'm just like, you're going to remaster a 5-year-old game, but you can't remaster Resistance, Killzone, or fucking, Bloodborne.
It's the 10-year anniversary. People have been clamoring for Bloodborne. Like, even if it was just a remaster, I think people would be happy, even if they're not getting a remake. Because that's a 10-year one. That was the beginning of the PS4 generation, Uncharted 4 has also gotten essentially a remaster.
Even Uncharted 1 through 3 got a remaster for PS4 that then got not upscaled to PS5, but it's playable on the PS5.
So I think that one is the one that's, with me, like, Bloodborne is a top 10 game, so I love Bloodborne.
I agree, but again, 10 years, so it's, to me, that's more understandable. But you're remastering Horizon Zero Dawn, you're remastering Days Gone, but you can't do Killzone, Resistance, Infamous. You can't do games that are trapped.
I feel like
on the
Killzone
PlayStation
3 would be a good one to go to.
Yeah.
Even Killzone 2, I mean, for the time, the graphics were pretty good on that one.
Great, yeah.
So,
And Infamous, there's lineage there. Like, you made a game on the PS4. Granted, fine, they didn't go on to PS5 to make another game, but you can't port those over. Why do I have to stream this through
Yeah.
the cloud to play this?
It's pretty curious. And I know the next thing on your list was I know you're a big fan of Digimon, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So remind me again, is this something that was already announced, or is this the first time it was announced?
This is a new Digimon. It's in the story franchise, I guess you want to call it. There's a Digimon story game called Cyber Sleuth that came out. They're re-released in 2016 on the Switch, and then prior to that, maybe on the Vita or something like that. But it's kind of well regarded within the Digimon community as one of the better story Digimon games, and we haven't seen one since. So it's been over 10 years.
So what exactly is a Digimon story game?
It's literally like it's focused on a narrative, but this is like I think a traditional turn-based RPG, but there's an actual just story. So they put the story moniker on it. It's weird because you read and you go, Digimon story, like, what the?
So that's one thing I'm curious about, because I used to watch Digimon a lot when I was a kid, and I kind of fell off of that, and I know like they've been trying to make Digimon more of a thing now, especially when you look at how popular Pokemon's been. Mm-hmm. And I haven't been getting that same nostalgia hit yet. So I'm curious to see how this one pans out. The fact that it was on the showcase, that gets you a lot of eyes, right? A lot of attention.
It's really big. In fact, a lot of people, I think, have been talking about it since the State of Play, because if you notice in the trailer, they had all the OG Digimon. So they cannot move past the fact that their first and second generation of Digimon have always been their best.
Oh, yeah.
They can't move past that.
I mean, I think I saw the third generation, and that was probably the last one. That was like the high-tech cell phone one or whatever. I remember that.
That was a good one.
I actually like that one. Yeah, that was interesting.
But we're probably in the minority.
I know, but I just thought it was like, at the time, especially because I feel like that was the turn of the century. Like, that was probably like early 2000s.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, man, this is totally going with the whole like early 2000s, like new to the internet vibe, like, because we had movies like Matrix and all those type of things. And so that nostalgia is kind of there, but I'm just kind of curious because I feel like, I don't know, at least for me, it's been kind of on a back burner for a while.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the trailer, they have Omnimon as usual. Like, he's in every goddamn new movie and show, and they can't get away from it because he's the most popular Digimon fusion ever. And that's a fusion of the two original Digimon, Agumon and... I'm already forgetting now.
Don't ask me. Wolf. I remember it was a blue wolf, but I don't remember what it was.
So it's like
Weremon or something like that? I feel like they would call it that.
Something like that. But, again, I am excited for this because it's not going to be breaking any boundaries in terms of like how they're fleshing out this franchise. It's more of, it's nice to see a new entry after so long. And it's probably something I will pick up. I really enjoyed Cyber Sleuth. I didn't beat it. I played maybe like 10 hours of it.
Okay,
and
that's
I really
a solid
did enjoy
amount.
Yeah, I really did enjoy it. And I feel like if they've learned anything from that since, and the fact that, the past 5 years, they've released new Digimon movies. They've released a new Digimon show. They've remade the original show. So they see there's an appetite for this. And I'm kind of digging that too. Like, again, it's another way to bring back something back from the past and just say, hey, we want to expand it. Kind of like Dragon Ball Z and bringing Dragon Ball Daima. And I know we'll talk about that a little later, but it's just funny to kind of see that.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I can kind of see why you like this show, because there's probably a lot of things that kind of like fit your niche, right? Like Sonic Racing, that was a thing. Borderlands 4, I know you really love.
I want to talk about that.
And that actually looked pretty good.
Oh my God, can we talk? First of all, let me say this. This trailer was way better than the initial trailer revealed 2 months ago or 3 months ago. It was shorter. It looked more cleaned, and it looked, just from a fidelity perspective, it looked better. So they've been doing work on it, obviously. But the fact that it's getting its own dedicated state of play in the spring, that was kind of shocking to me.
Yeah. I feel like that's what Sony kind of does, like when they realize, like, hey, like things are kind of light, they like double down on what they think is going to be like the thing for the year. And like Sony does a good job of making games that are multi-platform feel like they're exclusives.
Yeah.
And like Microsoft, even if it's a game that starts off as a timed exclusive, it doesn't feel the same as like, Sony. And I don't know if it's a marketing strategy or just because like they have such a huge console base, but like Borderlands, for instance, I'm sure there's plenty of people who are going to just think, oh, this is a Sony game, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I know Microsoft just went on record saying that they're going to say where all their games are being announced,
right,
are released, right? And Sony still throughout the showcase would not say it's coming out on Xbox, even if it was simultaneous releases. And I think for me, that is kind of annoying because it's like we are in tune enough with the industry that we know, okay, this game sounds like it's going to go multi-plat. And then I just have to do the extra step of Googling, you know? But for other people, they're not going to do that. They're not going to notice. And it's just like, I get Sony's strategy and I can't knock them because it's working, but I don't know. I just find it a little annoying.
It's annoying. I mean, you brought an example earlier about your barber going to the PSN store and saying, "Oh, this is a full-on remake for Days Gone." Like some of these people aren't going to research to know what other platforms it is going to be available on or what type of initiative.
And especially like if you know it's coming to that platform later, but Sony's just being quiet about it.
Yeah, purposefully. You have to make your own assumptions about it. And I think that's a detriment for the consumer, not the maker. Yeah. So I also find this interesting because, not so long ago, Embracer just sold off Gearbox, who's the developers and publishers of Borderlands, to Take-Two. And now we can maybe infer a couple of things here. One is we got a release date for Borderlands, so it's September 23rd, which tells us that Grand Theft Auto will be slightly after that, potentially. Yeah. It could still slip.
I feel like it's going to have to hit October, November.
I think October, November makes the most sense.
I think it's taking the spot that Call of Duty normally takes. And if Microsoft actually has a Call of Duty and it, loaded for this year, Microsoft always takes that pivotal spot.
I agree.
Well, I should say Activision always takes that pivotal spot. So I wonder what's going to happen if. I mean, Grand Theft Auto can honestly release whenever the hell it wants. It's not going to make any difference. There's been so much pent-up desire for that. But it is going to... I feel like you have to be mindful of your game's release, right?
Yeah. I think, and you look at Take-Two's perspective, I don't think this is going to devour or hurt Borderlands in any ways. If you release them 2 to 3 months apart, I think it's absolutely fine. I think you have different consumer bases for both types of games. I also think Activision has been releasing Call of Duty now in October, late October, for the last couple of years. So I think they're going to keep to that schedule.
I feel like with like games getting cannibalized by other releases, I think if you space them out by at least a month,
you're good. I think Call of Duty will be okay, but I think it will absolutely be outsold by Grand Theft Auto. I mean, you look at last year, Harry Potter outsold Call of Duty.
I think that was 2 years.
Or 2 years, but they outsold, which was crazy, but a game's already done it. So I think no matter who wants to release their games whenever.
Especially this far into the cycle, if we were early on in the generation cycle, there wasn't that many PS5s and Xboxes out then, maybe I'd say, who knows, but 75 million PlayStations,
at this point, and 30-something
million Xboxes, 100 million consoles out there, and there's probably going to be at least like a 20-30% attach rate.
I also think they probably won't release day and date on PC, so they're going to get most of the sales on console. So since you already have a big install base, you're going to be okay regardless. I also think maybe Sony ratchets it up with some marketing of their own. Do I think they'll have a state of play? I actually don't think they'll do a state of play. I don't think so.
I think I feel like Rockstar would not want to do that with Grand Theft Auto because they'll feel like it's beneath them. They're going to say Grand Theft Auto was so big, we make the PlayStation and Xbox profitable, I mean, that's kind of a hyperbolic thing, but it's not just a system seller, for an individual system. It's for the whole industry, we are going to carry the whole industry on our back.
That's true. And they have big cojones and they should be walking around with it. And again, they're releasing, now you have Mafia in the summer, you got Borderlands in September and they're saying to their investors, fall, you have Grand Theft. They're making
good money, man. They're making good money.
Yeah.
I have to give Take-Two props for that because I think the CEOs went on record about kind of the business strategy and stuff like that, and he's basically just said, "We're gonna cook. We're just gonna work on our games, and however long it takes is however long it takes." And I respect that a lot.
Well, let me ask you this because this was interesting. They just released this number because they do it every quarter, I think. Grand Theft Auto 5, first of all, has now hit a new milestone. It's sold 200 million copies.
No way! When did it hit over 100 million?
Dude,
when did that happen?
That's a long time ago, apparently.
So are people just buying it 2 to 3 times?
I don't even. I'm legitimately confused. What country or what continent is buying this game right now?
And it's not like it's crazy cheap.
Yeah, I know it's not.
It's still decently expensive.
They just announced new enhancements coming to Grand Theft Auto 5 on PC. Things that were already on the console now going to PC using direct storage, SSD, and they said the original version of the game can still be played, but they highly recommend now upgrading to this new patch for free. By the way, the patch is fucking free. on PC.
That's how it should be. But
that's how it should be.
I mean, it just makes you wonder if like Grand Theft Auto is such an event like every time, and they just find a way to outdo themselves. Like, where's the ceiling for this?
Yeah,
you know, like at what point are we like Grand Theft Auto can no longer grow anymore?
So let me ask you this now. Now that we're getting so close to 6, do you think 6 will ever outsell 5?
Well, I'd have to think about it more because I think one of the reasons why 5 sold so well is because it was so cross generational, right?
Right.
Didn't originally release on like PS3 and then it released on the PS4 and then I feel like people just bought it again on the PS5 to play on the,
and then PC.
And PC. So I feel like that in a way really like made the numbers go up. I don't know if it will sell bigger, 200 million is a lot, I guess it all depends on what is their plans for like the support afterwards.
Yeah.
I think there's actually as crazy as it is to say, I think there's a possibility,
I don't know. I've been thinking about this for a bit. You're right. The cross-gen factor made a big play because there was a lot of countries that still were on the PS3 360 before they could upgrade. And they just like, okay, we can still play this game. And they didn't have a need to upgrade.
Yeah.
I think that's going to hurt.
I feel like I think you're probably right because like, at a certain point, we're getting diminishing returns with these consoles in general. Like the PS6 is not going to be as big of a leap, I feel, versus the PS5. And then that's probably not going to be as massive of a leap compared to PS7, unless like AI is going to just radically change everything,
Right,
And so at that point, like, to me, if I bought Grand Theft Auto 5 on the PS3 and then I remember seeing that trailer for all the enhancements on the PS4 and I was like, oh my God. I have to get this.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that incentivized a lot of people to buy it again. But I find it hard to believe that could happen with the PS6 and then even the PS7, we'll have to see. But like, even when I look at the series, like I remember when the Xbox One X came out, compared to the original Xbox One, I was like, man, this actually feels like a pretty decent generational leap even though it was a half generation, right? And for me, like, I don't feel the same way about the PS5 Pro.
Like I don't either.
And so if already like technology is stagnating from a hardware perspective, like just halfway in,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I look at it too. It's like, will they re-release GTA 6 for PS6 and then Xbox X? Sure.
Oh yeah.
But they also did something which was really nice that I don't think was at launch for Grand Theft Auto 5 when they re-released it, was they added a first-person mode, I think. So it was cool caveat, like weird.
I remember that, yeah.
They're like, here's a way to play the game totally
I actually
different.
thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it actually really was.
One thing I never even thought about until now. Could it release on the Switch too?
I have a feeling it will. Not on launch, but I think it will. I actually think it will.
So that could actually make it sell better.
Yeah, I think it will sell better because it will release on the Switch. I think so. And they're not going to put the resources to release GTA 5 now on Switch. I just don't think they'll do on Switch 2. But I think this one eventually will come on the Switch too. And I think this will propel it. Okay, so like, I'll say yes.
Honestly, like GTA Online has been so big, for so long. And I feel like, there's certain games that I feel like just work well in the streamer economy. And I feel like Grand Theft Auto is one of them. So more than 200 million sales, that's crazy. That's just insane for me to wrap my head around.
It's been, what, 12 years now? So it took 12 years to get there.
Is it like the best-selling game of all time?
I think it is now, basically.
Unless you're like counting like Tetris or something like that.
Yeah,
I feel like Tetris is probably number one.
Hold on, actually, let me double check.
But while you pull that up, other things I wanted to talk about from the showcase. I guess for me, like, after seeing...
Number 2, Minecraft is number 1.
Minecraft is number 1? What? How many is it?
300.
Wow. Okay, well, there's all that money to Microsoft.
Yeah, and then Grand Theft Auto is number 2. So, wow.
I love how, like, for Grand Theft Auto, like 10 million sales just like is nothing.
And that's as of February 7th, 2025. So yeah,
still selling well.
Insane.
Because I imagine like people are actually probably buying it, in anticipation of Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, well, that's actually what's probably happening. I just bought GTA 5 a year ago because in anticipation of 6 because I never played it.
You never played
it. I just watched people play it. And so I was like, okay, it's time to get it now.
Oh my gosh. This game is going to hit 250 million. This game is going to be Minecraft.
Yeah, 100%.
300 million on Minecraft is really mind-blowing.
That's
really insane.
But
anyways, as I was saying, I guess for me, like when it came to the PlayStation Showcase, like I really was waiting on some of the PlayStation Studio games, And I think that was kind of my disappointment overall because I really wanted to see Ghost of Yotai. That was like a big one for me. And then Wolverine. That was another big
Yeah,
one
that's a
for
big
me.
one.
And especially with kind of the state of where Sony's at, like Sony has just been absolutely killing the game for so long. And like now I feel like they're still killing the game, but like I kind of have a little bit more question marks. And like we've talked about like some of the doubts or questions we have about their strategy or like some of their failures in the live service. And it's not often that like Sony has a bit of a bad rep and like Concord, like how often do we talk about like Sony's failures, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, now is a great time to just kind of change that narrative completely. Like, show us some gameplay for Ghost of Yotang, and like, no one is going to be talking about Concord, And so for me, like, that was a disappointment because I really wanted to see that. I don't really care for Death Stranding 2, but I know a lot of people do.
I
care
still wanted
for
to
it.
see it.
Yeah, so I was like hoping, okay, at least we'll get to see a little bit more about that. And I think there was some news about like, maybe some new game that was coming out, from the studio's teams. So that kind of was disappointing to me. We did get to see Saros or Saros, I don't know how you pronounce it. And I think like that game is going to do well. I think Housemarque are like exceptional developers, but for me, maybe I'm just old, but I just don't jive as much with, that whole genre. Returnal to me was good, but like nothing is the same as Hades. Like, I think a lot of people have like tried to copy Hades, and I think like Returnal was like its own niche, and I like that for like a roguelite, but like, for me, Hades was like the one roguelite where I was like, okay, this is actually like an interesting genre, just because of like how different those builds were. So although I think Saros is going to be good, like I would much rather personally have like a story driven IP like Killzone or Resistance as opposed to like Saros. Like I hope it's story driven. I hope there's a good story, but I just feel like that's hard to do in a roguelike. Like Hades did it very well, but that was such a niche thing to do with that genre. Returnal was kind of fascinating, kind of in this like aliens vibe. But honestly, like,
but the main character wasn't inspiring in any way.
If I reflect back on the story 3 or 4 years later,
it's not. See, that's the weird part. Is I was like looking up this up online, whether on Twitter and YouTube, but there's a lot of media pundits and even influencers that are saying, "Oh, I feel like the best PS5 game is actually Returnal," and I'm like, is it though? I'm like, it's hard for me to say.
I mean, are we talking about PS5 only?
PS5 only.
If it's PS5 only, then what is the competition? You literally have the Final Fantasies, which are on, to me, they're going to be multi-platform pretty soon.
Dark Souls Remake.
And they're not really PlayStation Studios. Then you have Dark Souls Remake. Or Demon Souls Remake. Then you have Spider-Man 2. And then you have Ratchet and Clank, which is long-running series. And personally, I don't think it's the best in the series. It's good, but I think that was... what is that? Not Rift in Time. The second PS3 game. I forget what it was.
There's so many, dude. There's so many.
It was something in time. I forget what it is. But I think that was the best one,
And then there's Spider-Man 2.
Yeah. Me, I would argue that Spider-Man 2 was the best because I was personally kind of disappointed with Spider-Man, and I felt like they really delivered on Spider-Man 2. But I can see why people would argue it's Returnal,
Yeah, I can see why people argue, but again, I look at it and I go, the big thing, like the game sold maybe 3 million units, and I think they had...
Which is good for a new IP.
There. It is. The thing is, it was a very difficult game, and I'm not saying I suck at games, but like...
It was hard.
Could I have played it and beat it? Sure. It would have taken me a full year to do it because... And here's what I'm gathering from Saros. They've already released some information based on the trailer is it's not really like permadeath and you lose everything. It's you die and you come back stronger by being able to upgrade certain weapons that you're using, and those are permanent upgrades after dying. So they're trying to like really speak to a more casual audience, I think, by making that change. But they're keeping the same.
I hope that makes it like more approachable, but also like still intense for the people who want to be intense.
Yeah.
Like my kind of issue with roguelite is I feel like and I'm sorry for the roguelike fans out there, but like I feel like you're taking essentially what would be a 2-hour game and you're padding it out to like 7 hours because instead of restarting in the checkpoint, I have to start all over. And then like the tension of the game is just I don't have to restart. I don't want to restart, but it's like you can make a permadeath mode like they did in Doom and kind of have that same tension. So like to me, like I feel like that part of it is artificial. I think like the reason the hooks are good and fascinating is because almost like gambling, there's like that like freshness and newness to each run where like you don't really know what you're gonna get and it's kind of like luck of the draw. And that's why I think Hades did it well because like with that one, like luck of the draw, even if like felt like you were having like a garbage run, Like there was plenty of times I was playing Hades and I thought I was like having a garbage run and I was so annoyed. Oh, I have to get all the way back to this point and I'm just bored and button mashing. And all of a sudden I'd be like, oh my god, like this build is amazing. Like, and then I remember my last builds that were successful were totally different than expected.
Yeah.
And so to me, that was amazing. And when it came to Returnal, though, very quickly I found which gun I wanted. And so for me, I was like waiting until I finally got the gun I wanted.
Yeah, and then you went all in.
Yeah, and so for me, like there was still that like newness and that freshness, you know, with each run to a certain extent. But it more felt like, okay, like this is kind of a slog until I get to that point.
Yeah.
But it's fun because it's a bullet hell slog. You know?
Yeah, like it's still mechanic wise was still great.
Yeah.
The boss fights were cool, but you were exploiting the game a little bit.
Yeah.
And
it's like I would rather have you like, you know me, like I'm big into stories, I'm big into characters. Like I would rather have you put that effort into like the narrative and the story. And like again, I think that's why Hades did it well. Is because we already know the myth of Hades and trying to get out of the underworld and all those type of things. And it was just the perfect fit. The more you talk to people, the more layers you got to the story. And it seemed like normal in that world. It didn't seem like some sort of weird twist like Deathloop or something like that. So that's why, for me personally, like I think Severance is probably gonna like open critic score. You can quote me on this. Probably gonna be like an 87. 80, and I think 87 is very good because I think Returnal probably got 84. If I'm remembering, I think it was like 84, 85. And I think it's going to be a successful game. I think people are going to love it. I think it's going to look absolutely amazing because Returnal already looked great.
Looked great.
But
they'll take advantage of PS4 5 Pro this time.
Yeah, but for me, like I was not as hyped for it. Like for me, even though I am not the biggest fan of Ghost of Tsushima, I still really enjoyed it, and I'm more looking for Ghost of Yokai.
That's surprising you're saying that.
And I talk a lot of smack about Ghost of Tsushima, but to me, that's more because the game isn't a 10 out of 10, and I kind of say that as a rebuttal to why I don't feel like it's a 10 out of 10. But the game is still objectively a very good game.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I'm looking at this from a couple of different angles. One is, by the time Saros launches, it'll have been 5 years, I think, since Returnal launched, which is crazy because...
That's insane.
Yeah, again, the game itself, Returnal, wasn't a big game in terms of scope, right? And yeah, you're changing up the story... And that takes time, but 5 years still? You're building off an already pre-existing system.
Yeah, I wonder what it's going to be like because, man, the action of Returnal was amazing. I can't see them really refining or reinventing the actual gunplay because it felt so good already.
And then they're like, hey, we're going to show off gameplay this year. So I was kind of shocked they said that, which is... So the question then becomes where? You're going to have a showcase finally, Sony? Are you going to do a state of play again around E3-ish kind of timeline? If you do, great. But this time I'm going to be able to tell whether this game speaks to me because now that I know how Returnal feels, because I played it with you specifically, I'll be able to tell whether this game is going to be something up my alley just based on pure gameplay. So I don't know. I'm confused because...
I think this is a good example of like a wait and see. And it's so ironic because that is Xbox. Xbox always release these CG trailers and then you would see it and be like, okay, I don't know how to feel about this.
Now I feel that way about this.
And that's how I feel about Cyrus because, like, knowing the pedigree of that studio, knowing the pedigree of Sony in general, like, I feel like it's going to be a hit.
Yeah, I think
but it's just, like, it's hard for me to get hyped,
Yeah, and the other thing is, for sure, I'm a little biased, but Indians represent,
I know, that's nice.
I mean, main character's name is named after me, Arjun,
Yeah, that's true, I can't think of a blockbuster game that has an Indian protagonist.
Yeah, I really could.
I think the first one.
It has to be. Well, so Raul Kohli has played like characters in Gears of War 4. He was like, I don't know.
How did I not notice him?
Yeah, he's like a Muslim character or something. And then he was in that one show written by Mike Flanagan that came out a couple years ago where he was like the main protagonist. He was like a cop. So he was on an island. I forgot what that show was called. So there's like different forms of art that he's been part of, but like, it's not super prominent, but this is the first time, like, damn, like this kind of almost fits him really well. He's got that rugged look in the trailer. He's got the big beard. He comes back and he's like, oh, I'm coming back again, So it's like, okay, I really like that. So yeah, I we'll see. It's a wait and see for me. I just want to see the gameplay.
Yeah. Anything else from the state of play that you want to talk about or that you were hyped about?
Yeah, for sure. So there was some stuff that really spoke to me again. I think this state of play and just in general, I think what's coming back is action games, right? We talked about Ninja Gaiden 4.
That's true, yeah.
But like, dude, Hell Is Us, this is their second time showing this game. It kind of looks like a mix of like Star Wars, Jedi, Survivor, and like What else? Like I forgot what
I
other game I
mean,
was thinking.
I was kind of getting Death Stranding vibes for a little bit because I think the guy was in like a trench coat for a
He's
second,
in a trench coat.
and then
So
I was
yeah,
like,
so you get the Death Stranding
is
vibes.
this Death Stranding?
But if you watch the first trailer a couple months ago that was released, it looks just like Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order. So I was like, wow, okay. So they got that. You got Lies of P Overture, which is you have to have the base game, but it's a DLC to that, and then you have Lost Soul Aside, which I want to talk about in a second. But before that, you have where's the game? You have Animusha that's coming back.
Big action game, yeah.
Another action game, and then you
Are you talking
have
about Tides of Annihilation?
Ties of Annihilation.
Did they just announce this game here?
Yeah, this might have been the first announcement.
Okay.
So like again, it's like we're kind of moving away now from the Dark Souls like genre, and we're going back to action heavy.
And I'm actually really happy for that because, again, unpopular opinion, like to me, I liked Lies of P and Bloodborne more than I liked Elden Ring.
Yeah,
but I will, say that that's a very subjective, interpretation on my account. I think most people in general are always going to say Elden Ring is better, and I think objectively, like that's the magna opus. Like I feel like in that genre, like Elden Ring hit everything, and like at that point, like if you're just gonna do more Souls like at a certain point, it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, what's the point?
Like
it's already been played out, and I like the reason why I like action games a little more now is because there's stories to them to tell. So they might not be the best, but like at least I'm getting something.
Yeah, and for me, it's kind of like nostalgia. It's like a warm cookie, Like I miss those fun action games. Like you don't have to like spend so much time in them. It's just like
I'm playing Ninja Gaiden Sigma.
Ninja Gaiden 2 Black
or Black 2, whatever it's called.
Don't say Sigma. That's gonna piss off a lot of educated
Black
fans.
2. And there's it's a very simple story, but like I like seeing the cutscenes. I like that there's something there to it. It's not Elden Ring.
You're just like the story is garbage. But
it's garbage, but like it reminds me of that warm cookie, that fond memory. And so like there's a couple I want to talk about some of these games. So like Tides of Annihilation, first time showing it off. And what do? They don't just show us a trailer. They gave us 11 minutes of gameplay after the state of play. Like, I thought that was
I don't
great.
think I looked at the gameplay afterwards.
Yeah, and it looks really good. And I'm like, okay, fine. So that was a great way to show that game off. You got Lost Soul Aside, right? So
that game, I really didn't know much about it. And, I mean, I always get confused with these games because they say it's like one developer. And I look at the game, I'm like, what are you talking about? How is it possible, I guess I never realized.
It's taken inspiration.
I don't know how many of these opinions I have that probably go against the grain.
I think you really like Final Fantasy 15. I think that's what I'm getting from it.
Yeah, I really did like Final Fantasy 15. And to me, this is kind of a mixture of Final Fantasy 15, Devil May Cry.
Yeah,
and that's
it really is.
I'm feeling that.
So they had an interview after the state of play for this game specifically, and it's been in development for more than 10 years. It started with one person who honestly had a concept for the game. He wasn't even really thinking it would become a game.
Concept of a plan?
Yes, basically. And someone from Sony reached out to him saying, hey, like, do you think we could do some sort of collaboration? He's like, sure, but like, I don't even anticipate this becoming a game. I don't have the resources. I myself can't even make it. And it evolved from a conversation with Sony to being like, let's cross-collaborate, to then being part of the China Hero project 5 years later, which means he got funding from Sony and resources from Sony to help develop.
I love that.
And then what Sony did was, instead of just helping him make the game, he had people join him and they helped upskill their talents to say, this is how you actually produce a game. So then they added voice acting, they added a story, and they said, and you can kind of look at the interview if you guys check it online. The main developer says, like, we're so happy that we learned how to action make because it was so frustrating beforehand. We didn't know what to do.
I love that, and like, that's one thing I feel like Xbox does as well, and like Sony is doing in this example as well, like, like helping build something more from the ground up, and like, in a way, this is kind of an ID game, right? It's like an independent developer.
It really
and then Sony took them under the umbrella, and really that idea is golden, and like they were able to really expand on that. So, to me, like I actually hope Lost Soul Aside is a hit.
I do too.
Because I feel like if we see successes like that, like it will kind of help, kind of shape the gaming industry in a positive way, right? Where like we want to reward creativity like this.
Yeah, so it's so funny too because they basically said, like, Sony came to them and said, hey, well, you now have this game, but like we want to flesh out these battles more. We want to make them slightly more complex or less complex or slightly more harder or whatever. And on top of all that, now you can infer a couple things from here. It's coming out May 30th, I want to say. They're releasing it simultaneously on PC and PlayStation 5, which is no coincidence. This is originating from China. They know most of those players are playing on PC. And as we can look at Wukong, that sold 70% of its
This is
games
such
on
a
PC.
smart way for like PlayStation to pivot into the Chinese market because you know I'm sure I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure a lot of PS5s were sold in China for Wukong, and now like and right now there's a big movement for Chinese nationalism when it comes to media. I think I was hearing that like Nizao 2 hit like 2 billion.
2 billion, and I haven't even seen the movie yet.
Because it's only in China, basically. I think they've made some money in other overseas markets, but that's just the power of the Chinese market,
Yeah,
So
insane.
like, and before, like you used to try and get like, essentially like it was almost like imperialism in a way, like all these Western nations trying to use China as its own market, and like China's really pushed back against that, and I think kudos for them, right? Because then you're just basically a wallet for them, But I like this approach better, where it's like you're helping develop things from the ground up in that market, and now everyone gets to kind of benefit from that because like for people in America or Europe or like outside of China, you get to experience something that's different. That's what we want. We're feeling so burnt out, and for people from China, they're gonna be like, heck yeah, we're making awesome games.
Yeah, so I think this game will probably sell better on PC than it does PlayStation just because of the Chinese audience. But will this sell 10 million plus like Wukong did? Because I think Wukong now hit 25 million or something.
I mean, Wukong was crazy. Wukong sold so much. I don't really know how this new way all these new Chinese games are gonna do because that's one of them. I think on our last pod we were talking about Wu Chang, and that game looked pretty good to me as well.
Stellar Blade was made by Korean developers.
Korea, yeah. I think Tides of Annihilation, is that one Korea as well?
I don't know if it's Korea or China.
Maybe I'll look that up.
So again, hey, look, to all the people in China that are listening to this, maybe you're not, maybe you are, show up, support, for your homies, maybe. And if this does great, guess what? Maybe we can get more Final Fantasy like types of games. I hate to say this is that type of game, but there's so many similarities.
No, Tides of Annihilation is also an indie team in China. Yeah, all right.
So yeah, like again, I these games speak to me. That's why I gave this like higher grade. So there was that, and then there was.
So for me, I get your point, but because I don't really know these games, it kind of felt a little more generic to me because I'm like, okay, this is Final Fantasy. I can see where the inspirations are derived from. And until I really get to see reviews or sit down with the game, I don't know. There's a lot of promising things that I see there, but it's really hard for me to comment.
Well, it could be another Stellar, but it's really not that big of a game. It's just like it feels like a concept of a game, and you're like, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be, right?
And like for instance, like I remember when I was looking up stuff for Lies of P, like I was like, oh man, this game looks good to me, but I think it's probably not going to be great because I was like, I don't know the studio, and I feel like I've seen so many of these things. Like there was like, what was it? It was like almost like a British or like European, like kind of like gothic Souls like that came out like a couple years ago that my cousin was really into, and that got like decent reviews, and so like I just felt like it was another one of those, like, okay, like another thing to pad out in the genre. And Lies of P is like one of my favorite games in a long time. So I don't know how these are going to turn out, but I will say Sony does a pretty good job of curation. Yeah. Most of the games they put their stamp on end up being at least 80 plus.
I'm going to be a little cautious and skeptical because when they show this trailer for Lost Soul Side, you could tell the story elements look kind of not so good, like high quality. I'm like, okay, it's probably going to fail in that aspect. But if the gameplay's still good, I don't even know if this is a semi-open world, if this is an open world, if this is a linear game. It could be a completely linear game, again, like Stellar Blade, and it's like a 10-hour game, and we're like, oh, great, this wasn't anything, But not to say that it's a downgrade quality, it's just like maybe my expectations were a lot higher when it's really not. Maybe it isn't really a Final Fantasy-esque type of game, because Final Fantasy is it's an action RPG,
Yeah.
And also speaking of Lies of P Overture, I think that was
looked great. That looked really good.
Yeah, to me, it reminded me of Final Fantasy 13 with the music. It was just like really spot on. Actually, I did not really care for Lies of P even when it came out, even though I played it with you a little bit. Seeing this trailer got me so hyped. I was like, wow, I think I want to buy
it. It does kind of feel like a different vibe. I mean, for me, one of the things I think is really underrepresented, actually all of media, but in particular video games, is kind of, what am I looking for? Oh, I blanked on the term. Kind of like that old British vibe. I'm totally forgetting the word. It was like the Order 1886, like that kind
of. No, I'm forgetting too.
It's not gothic. It's not gothic.
It's not gothic.
But like that vibe, like I feel like that is highly missing, and so that's why I really like Lies of P, because it kind of had
not
that
medieval, but you're talking about like
It probably says a lot that we don't remember it. Victorian.
Victorian.
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, and just like that new game that's coming out from that Xbox team. I also forgot their name. So I need some coffee. No, the people who made Wasteland.
Oh my god, Exile, yeah.
I was hoping you would fill in the gap.
Sorry, I mean, I was like, what are you talking about?
No, Exile, I'm happy that we're starting to see more of that Victorian vibe because, like, I think that's one thing that's really underrepresented.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's definitely a place that should be represented a little more.
But we got like Sherlock Holmes and stuff like that back in the day, and I guess it's just not popular anymore.
Yeah, it isn't, and it's funny you say that because they just made a Sherlock game where they announced one like a couple years ago, and I haven't seen it since.
Yeah, who knows what's going on with that? So to me, like that's why I really like Lies of P. But you're right, like this is kind of pivoting away from that a little bit, and like I don't know how to put words to like that Final Fantasy vibe, you know, but like
it was there with the music and the way they filmed the trailer because it wasn't like moment to moment gameplay, but it was like the attacks. It looked so Final Fantasy.
It's like the animations.
Yeah, the animations. I was like, oh, okay, wow. I just couldn't get over the fact that
I wonder what the gameplay is going to be like because you know.
Well, it looked more action heavy than it did like Souls like it was really weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I thought the Souls like action in that game was awesome. I think it's like one of top 3 in the genre. So. I think that's going to be a hit. I wonder how much they're going to charge for that, honestly.
Yeah,
I feel like it's probably going to be $29.99, but we'll see.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was $40 because they now know that the game sold so well. But yeah, I would hope it's like a $30 expansion. But yeah, there's 3 more games I really want to talk about really quickly here. One was they showed more of Onimusha: Way of the Sword, as well as announcing a remaster of Onimusha 2. I've never played any of the Onimusha games.
Neither.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think I'm going to get the second remaster game. It just doesn't look appealing to me. But Way of the Sword, the one thing I liked what they showed this time, it looked better than the first reveal, was the environments play a part in the way you
interact with the environments.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I didn't realize, and I think I'd read an article about this later. You know, the main character in Onimusha, he's actually a famous Japanese actor.
Yeah, so the newest one is being modeled after a very famous late actor that no longer obviously is here. But that was interesting.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, he was known for a lot of his samurai and inspired movies for back then.
That kind of like adds like a layer of authenticity.
Yeah, I actually like that. And I saw his picture and then the model almost 1-for-1. It's kind of insane. So if I was part of his family, I'd be like, damn, that's grandpa or that's dad or whoever.
I mean, I feel like for probably people who have been PlayStation diehards since PS2, oh my, they're probably so happy. To see something like this and that fidelity,
yes,
right?
That's the main thing.
I mean, it looks awesome. Again, for this, like,
I think it had a cult following.
Yeah, it's just not something I grew up with. Again, so it's one of those things where I'm like, all right, looks cool. We'll see. You know?
Yeah, I'm excited because again, with the new Capcom engine or the Resident Evil engine, whatever they call it now these days, if they truly flush this game out, I still don't know if it's going to be because the interview that came out after the fact said we're not trying to make it overly complex and difficult game, which I like. So it's not going to be like probably Sekiro or some of those more difficult games like Wukong. But if they pad it out a bit to make it like a 15-hour game, I'd be happy with that. Again, I don't need it to be super linear, but like give me a good story. Allow me to explore a couple of different places. Like, I think Ninja Gaiden did a good job in this aspect, but they're kind of pretty big maps.
Yeah.
And I'm like going
the
back.
Linear, like you can still kind of explore. You get a little bit more, not open world. Like, it feels a little more fleshed out. It's not just a hallway. I was actually just looking this up. So Monster Hunter is also Capcom, right?
Yeah.
And then Onimusha is Capcom too?
Yeah.
Man, Capcom has been on a roar lately.
They're on a tear, man. They're bringing back everything. They're just like, let's just spice this up.
And I feel like their engine really is just
so
it's
good.
Flexible, and then like every game kind of has this like distinctive like high fidelity look to it, you know?
Yeah, the RE engine is what it's called.
Yeah.
Because they first started by remaking the Resident Evil games and they named it after that. And they actually just showed off last year that their new evolution to their engine. So they're now calling it RE Next Gen or REX or something.
I feel like that right there is the best example of what a successful engine can do for a company.
Yeah.
Because if like you're firing on all cylinders and you have an engine that really works with the type of games you're making, like look at how many bangers they're releasing, like, one after one after one. Like, could you? I mean, I'm not saying Sega hasn't been releasing good games because they have. But can you imagine if they? Because I feel like Sega games don't always have that same level of graphical fidelity.
Yeah,
they're more gameplay focused. But could you imagine that?
Man! Oh my god! If Sega came back the same
Can you imagine
way,
a Sonic that looked that good?
Oh my god! Don't get me started. You know that, and that's the funny part because with Capcom, it benefits them more to use their own engine because they don't have to pay a licensing fee.
That's true, yeah.
So they're getting all 100% of the proceeds, basically. Well, besides the
I know
fact that
what you
they're
mean.
releasing
I
a
know what
different
you mean.
platform, but like, they don't have to pay Unreal or they don't have to pay Epic or all these other people like, hey, we use your engine. So it just benefited them so well, and now they're taking so much time to develop the games and they're giving it a lot of love and care. So Dragon's Dogma, even though it took a while to make the second part, I mean it sold well, 3 million plus
That's
copies.
amazing
Like
for
it's
them. Yeah,
really
and I
good
mean their games are
for a niche
reviewing
game.
well. Man, Capcom is really doing well. I feel like they've been one of the stories of
Yeah.
this generation.
And speaking of Capcom, so they did show another trailer for Monster Hunter Wilds, and the game is out this Friday on the 28th. The reviews are already up. He has like maybe an 89 on Open Critic,
Which is
I want to think,
amazing.
which is great. Apparently, this game is a little more streamlined in the sense that the story is a lot shorter than the last one, so about 15 hours, which I like. And they made some improvements. I might actually try my first Monster Hunter game ever, just because of the fact
Did
that
you play the last one?
I tried and I couldn't get into
I
it.
tried it too. I couldn't get into it because it was on Game Pass, and I was like, all right. And I had some friends who played it, and they were like, "Oh man, it's the best game ever. You
Right.
got to get into it." And then I like played like an hour, and I was like, I don't know. I feel like I can't invest this much time into it.
If I'm already having trouble with the base game, which is supposed to be very easy, there's a difficulty spike when you start playing the multiplayer missions. They're so hard, especially even Iceborne when it released. The people that are really good at the game said that even Iceborne's story gave them problems. So I can't play a game like that where if the combat doesn't already speak to me, I'm not going to spend a bunch of my energy trying to be good.
Yeah.
That's a game where you said it best to me. It's like if you don't like a game, don't play it anymore. You know, and that's so. I hope that maybe this is a little different. So I might actually give this a shot. And then finally, just to talk about, because this was hilarious, it was leaked. The Meta Delta trailer. Again, the trailer was actually badass, in my opinion. It's out in August as well. It looks fantastic, but the fucking trailer was leaked a week in advance. So I don't know. I'm really excited for this game. They announced a collector's edition. It looks cool. I'm not getting it, but I will. I hope. Actually, I kind of hope this game comes out on the Switch too. This looks like a perfect.
It's a good game for that. Yeah. I guess. For me, the only Metal Gear Solid I really got into, I got into 4. I really like that one.
Really
I like the Peace Walker. I think that was on the PSP.
PSP.
I couldn't get into Metal Gear Solid 5. I don't know if it was like the flashback thing. It just like was there was like this guy on fire, and and then all of a sudden I'm in a desert, and I don't know. I just couldn't get into it for whatever reason. And so to me, like I know everyone really loves Metal Gear Solid 3. I don't know. I feel like I'm so busy with other games that it's not high up on my priority list, but that's one of the most successful games and most loved games. So I think that's going to sell really well.
I think, and maybe we've talked about this before in the past, I can't remember, but they're adding a new mode. So if you play it third person behind the back, the game is supposedly easier. That's what the developers have said. And I think I'm going to play that way because playing Metal Gear Solid 3 in the top-down view, they'll have that option as well, was a lot harder back in the day, and I just don't think I'm going to play it that way. But they have also admitted that they had to adjust the difficulty because it's easier now with the third-person view. So I will probably get it just for the fact that it's more modernized now. The story looks so janky and fun.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you like stealth games?
Kind of. Again, 4 really spoke to me. Metal Gear Solid 4 really spoke to me. But then games like Arcane's, what was the...
Dishonored?
Dishonored really didn't, Yeah,
so, I don't like stealth games, I feel like when I'm playing them, I have this anxiety that I'm going to be found. Yeah. And then it's like more anxiety provoking for me. And I would rather just run in there and kill everyone. And actually, I think the reason I like Metal Gear Solid 4
is you could do that.
I found a grenade launcher and I just got a bunch of grenades and I just played that game like it was an action game. And I was like, oh man, this is a super epic hard action game because I am slaughtering everybody when I'm not supposed to.
Which is funny you say that because I think that's why I like that game. It wasn't the stealth aspect.
And I probably like played more successfully like as a stealth game. But after I just got a ton of bullets and a ton of guns, I was like, let's go. I don't even care how hard these bosses are. I don't care how hard everyone is. They're about to die from like 50 grenades.
Yeah, that's exactly how I beat the game, which I didn't play it the way it was intended. But I think that's why you don't like 5 and I don't either, because they doubled down.
You have to do more stealth, yeah.
You have to double down on the stealth. And they also made it open world. So it's like you combine the two, it's more frustrating because it's bigger, it's slower now.
Yeah.
And you just like...
Yeah, it's kind of hard to just like grind and get a bunch of weapons and then just like blast through it. Like maybe people do that, but yeah, I mean that's just kind of not my genre.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, that's all I have to say about State of Play, but there's definitely more things to talk about here.
So the one big thing I wanted to talk about was Avowed because I blasted through that game. So we live in Michigan, so the weather was terrible, and I think we got one of the worst winter storms we've had in years.
It was like 6 to 8 inches.
Oh man, it was insane. And so I was stuck at home. I had the weekend off. I didn't have to work, so I was bored, and I was like, you know what? Screw it. I spent the extra $20. I got early access.
Oh my god.
And honestly, like, I got nothing for the early access, you know.
Told you.
And honestly, in some ways, I feel like getting early access was detrimental because, you know, one of the criticisms I had with the game, and I remember I told you about this, you know, in the middle of it, was that for me, I don't really like grinding. You know, I don't like having to level up in RPGs to be able to, you know, blast through them. And in that game, like, no matter how skilled you are, if your gear was like at a much lower level, not even your level, like your actual gear was at a much lower level, those enemies were like impossible. And I remember there was one boss and I just could not beat him. And then I got pissed and I was like, I'm going to beat this guy, even though it was like every one of my hits was doing like less than 1% damage. It was insane. It took me probably like 45 minutes of just whittling away at this guy just to kill him. And it probably took me like 3 hours to beat him.
Oh my God.
I did the same thing in Black Myth Wukong. There was the second, I think it was like the second hub world. It was like this yellow, it was actually a really good design. It was like this yellow monk that was a rodent. And I was supposed to do some of the side mission content to get a weapon to stop him. And I was like, no, I'm going to beat him. And my wife literally watched me try and fight this guy for 6 hours. I refused. I refused to, like, you know, grind or, you know, do the side mission to beat him. And I finally beat him, and I felt so great. So I did the same thing with Avowed. I tried really hard. I finally beat this guy, you know. And then, I mean, now, like, I say all this because I think they got that feedback really quickly from the early access people, and then they already updated it. And so now, like, even though you get a penalty if you are under gear, it's not as severe. So you don't have to, like, the enemy is not going to feel like a bullet sponge as much. I was also playing on, like, a hard difficulty. I think I was playing on the hardest difficulty, which is also why it probably kind of felt like a bullet sponge.
What was the Bethesda game that just came out a year ago?
Are you talking about Starfield?
Yeah, didn't you run into the same issue where at the very end, because you blasted through it, like the dog fight, you literally couldn't do it?
Oh my god, that was so hard too. I remember you came over and saw me because I refused to upgrade my ship. So I did the bare minimum and I showed up to this place. Oh my god, I was getting decimated. I tried so hard and I was so stubborn. I actually gave in on that one. I actually left and I did a side mission and I got a ship and it only took me like an hour and I came back and I wrecked them. And I felt great. But that one I could not beat with that ship. It was impossible.
Yeah, that was like... But it just makes me laugh because every time you play an RPG, you're like, all right, let me go through this really head-on and strong, you know, steadfast. And then you're like, wow, this game is gatekeeping me from being able to do that. I hate the gatekeeping.
You know, I remember Final Fantasy 15. I refused to do any of the side missions. I got to the very end of the game, and then it wasn't the final boss. It was a random, I think it was like a Cerebus, like, side boss. The three-headed thing. That thing was impossible.
Yeah, it was impossible.
Oh my god. You know, and I couldn't beat him. I had to turn the difficulty down.
So, you know what's funny? I actually kind of cheated. I don't know if I actually cheated, but I got a ring in the game, and I don't know if it was a bonus, but as soon as I saw the Cerebus, you just activate it, and it gets shot into a void and automatically dies. Yeah, I was like, how did I get this weapon? And I think it was a pre-order bonus. And so I was like, oh, this was so easy. I'm like, what is Shimmer talking about?
That was the hardest boss in the game, bro.
You're right. It's part of the main story because it puts it right before the final boss. So but when I activated
it was harder than the final boss. That was the... I felt I was so ashamed of myself. I carry the guilt to this day. Could not beat that thing. It was impossible. I was super underleveled. I think like I was 15 levels lower than where I was supposed to be. Like, because there was like a level where like be like level 50 to like 65 online on the guy. I was like level 35. It was like so impossible for me.
I feel like I was like maybe 40, and I'm like, what is this thing? Like, let me try it. And when I activated, I'm like instant, like, oh, this was easy.
And then the final boss, he wasn't even that hard.
Yeah, it wasn't even that hard.
But yeah, I don't know why I do that, but I do that for all the RPGs. But anyways, going back to Avowed, I kind of wanted to give my thoughts about the game because I have been hyped about the game for a long time. It was like a long time coming.
Would you call this the next Skyrim?
No, absolutely not. You know, and I mean, the one thing I will give Obsidian credit for is they were very vocal about it. They said like, "Hey, we were trying to make Skyrim that was, you know, that had some multiplayer features, and then we pivoted away from it." You know, they even came out and said in a recent interview like the art style we had in the beginning in that trailer was actually what we were going for at the time, and then they changed. You know, and that happens. And so, no, it's absolutely not Skyrim. And I think most of the flack you're seeing online for it is because people are comparing it to Skyrim. And like, I really thought about this game and like, what is it that's different in this game compared to Skyrim that people are not really vibing with, right? And I think when we talk about choice and consequence, we're actually kind of grouping that in with another feature of RPGs that I would call world reactivity. And so, I think a lot of people would say like, oh yeah, I can make this choice and it has that consequence, right? But I feel like when it comes to the like an Obsidian game, like when they're talking about choice and consequence, they mean from a narrative perspective. Like there's certain pivotal points in each of the sections in Avowed, and they actually are kind of hard decisions you have to make, and they will all sum up in the end to create a pretty different world state. And depending on the choices you've made, like I think they said that there's 10 endings, but I feel like there's more than that. Like I feel like really there's a lot of different endings, and I would say some of them don't seem so different from each other, but the difference between like certain ones are like night and day. Like
Okay.
they're drastically different. And like if you were to make a sequel to Avowed, like those two would look completely different.
Yeah.
So like it would look like a completely different game. So the choice and consequence is there for the main missions at definitely. And I think, I mean, it follows with Obsidian's pedigrees that some of these decisions are hard.
Yeah.
I don't think they're as difficult as the Outer Worlds because I remember when I was making some of the decisions for Outer Worlds, I was like, man, I don't really know what to pick because I was like, oh my god, this is impossible. And for this one, I was like, I kind of know where I'm leaning, so it didn't give me as much of that internal angst. So overall, I don't think the decisions were as good, but they were still pretty pivotal decisions, and I'm really happy with where the story ended. I think the big problem was the reactivity. Like people are expecting reactivity, and I feel like Avowed in some ways has suffered some consequences like after Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
Because Baldur's Gate 3 like set a new peak and level
Yeah,
for the
standard.
reactivity, the standard, that's what I'm looking for. They set a new standard for what we expect in terms of reactivity in our games, right? And so like the clips you'll see online is like, oh, if I steal this item, no one cares. If I shoot an arrow at this person, no one cares.
Yeah.
If I burn
Which
my
is
companion's
hilarious.
house, no one cares.
Yeah.
And it's like, so then what is the purpose of like the choices I make? And I would argue that's more the reactivity of the world and more simulation.
Yeah,
right?
simulation.
Because like trying to simulate like what the world is going to be like. No matter what you do, your companion is going to stick with you until the very end. And that's just the future of Avowed. That's like that was their creative choice and what they went for. I mean, I would say that's a valid criticism.
It is.
But for me, I don't really care for that.
It doesn't deter.
Like I remember, like when I read Red Dead 2 came out, I was like, telling my wife about it. I was like, the horse's schlong will change size based off the temperature, and she was just like, "Why do you care?" And do you understand where the gaming industry is headed? If this is the type of stuff we're seeing in the world, how do you think about this? This is making things so like lifelike. And then it's like, okay, but doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And for some people, like it's important because like they want to really feel immersed in that world and they want to feel like it's their world, right? And that's why they play the game. And I'm not knocking that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just like that's what attracts me to the game. Like I'm more interested in like the world, the lore, the characters, the interactions, the plot. Like that's what I play for. And for me, I think Avowed delivered on most of those things. I will say that the companions are not that interesting, like their backstories not that great, and I think they're fairly one-dimensional, so I think that's a criticism of the game overall. Like the thing that surprised me the most, the parts of Avowed that I think are the best are the parts of Avowed that I thought were going to be trash, and that was the graphics and the gameplay. And really for me, like gameplay was king in that game. Like I had so much fun being a wizard. Like I had so much fun just like blasting my way
Combat
through
looks really
spells.
fun. The fact that you can combo so many different weapons.
Oh yeah, and then like I mean, to me, like the way where Avowed really progressed action RPGs is the combat because to me, I was like, man, this is like what I would expect the first person Fable to be like. And it's like switching between like your melee weapons, your magic weapons, your wand. I was like, oh man, I feel like Harry Potter.
Right.
And then like your guns was so fluid, so good. The way the stamina was used was great. And the gameplay styles were, pretty different. So really, I was amazed at how good the gameplay felt, how like punchy and weighty like the blows were, and that was one thing everybody was hating on. And I really think they polished that up in the few extra months that they had. So that was surprising to me. The graphics were surprisingly good.
They added a 60 FPS mode, right? Did you play? What did you?
They
play
had a
on?
60 FPS mode. So I don't know if I mentioned this in the podcast, but I just spoiled myself with a new 77-inch OLED TV and from Samsung, which you helped me get with your advice. And so that was awesome. And now I have VRR, which is amazing. And I don't
So
feel
you
like
play
I'm a peasant. So I played on the
40.
40 hertz mode.
Okay.
And then I used VRR. And I felt like that was a really good balance.
So what's the native resolution at 40 FPS? Is it like 1440p? Is it 4K?
I had no idea. I mean, it was upscaling fairly well. It didn't seem like everything was glossy. So it felt like it was decently sharp. The character models aren't the best, but I feel like that's because Baldur's Gate 3 has set the standard so high that the character models just don't always, pass that. I think like the main characters look pretty good, but it's not as good as Baldur's Gate 3.
That's fair.
There was some, I don't know, like I really want to see like the Digital Foundry video on that. I didn't get to watch that actually because maybe this is just the way I played, and I don't know if everyone else had this experience, but man, I went crazy with the spells. And I had the biggest area effect like spells, and I had a really short cooldown, so I would blast 3 area effect spells like every 5 seconds while blasting my wand. And the game wouldn't like have frame drops necessarily, but at a certain point, like my input and actions were slowed. So like it was almost like my character was like moving in molasses and like all of my actions were still happening, but like the wand like bursts of energy were like coming out kind of slow. And
Interesting.
but it wasn't like choppy per se, but I felt like it was just kind of slowing down the frame rate to like, but then just like kind of like smoothly buttering. And I'm sure Digital Foundry will do a way better analysis than me, right, on that. It did kind of impact, how I was playing.
Yeah.
It was kind of annoying, but at the same time, there's so much stuff going on with the particle effects. It was insane. Like,
Sounds like
so
a lot.
I
Sounds
was
like you.
probably pushing that to the extreme.
Yeah, it sounds like you got to live your dream as playing as like Voldemort or some like freaking Hogwarts
It
student.
really
Here.
did feel like you were playing Hogwarts. I had a book in one hand and a wand in
Yeah.
the other. I'm just blasting them with spells and just calling fire and ice
That's
and
so funny.
thunder. I had a blast with the actual gameplay. I personally think the story ended up in a really interesting place. When I first started playing Avowed, for like, there's like 4 hub worlds.
Okay.
Like, the story was pretty much trash for the first hub world, and for the second one, it was still trash, but it was getting more interesting. And by the time we got to the 4th one, I was like, okay, now this is kind of interesting.
Okay.
And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, if I was a writer, would I have done something differently? Because like where we end up is pretty fascinating, and it's like, why wasn't this fascinating to me from the start? And I don't want to go into spoiler details, so I can't like go too much into that. Maybe later when more people have played it, we'll talk about it in the podcast. I think it was fairly predictable, and I think that's one of the criticisms people had.
I mean, you just played Dragon Age, so I'm now kind of curious comparison wise, not gameplay, but just story wise, writing. How was it compared?
So I have a lot of thoughts, and I know they're unpopular opinions because right now everyone hates both of them. I actually think people overall the sentiment is better for Avowed.
Yeah,
like,
I
people
do too.
just hate Dragon Age with a passion, and I was just looking them up on OpenCritic, and that's kind of my barometer what I go by. They're like pretty similar. I think they're like 80 and 81, so
Wow.
they're both 8s out of 10s.
Okay.
So when it comes to the writing, like Obsidian is very clearly a video game like game, like
Yeah.
in the sense that like they're not trying to be like, I feel like sometimes Sony games will try to be like almost be like a better version of Hollywood, right? Like they're just like so film like and movie like. Like Obsidian is not trying to do that in this game, at least to me. Like it's clearly a video game, and like the same type of video game tropes that we would see in like the Xbox 360 generation is what I'm seeing here. Like characters will have a bunch of exposition, which sometimes is obvious, but they're still saying it and they're over describing things. It almost feels like something sometimes you're reading things from like a glossary because they're just having like such an info dump on you. The characters' interactions don't always feel like natural in the same way like human interactions feel natural because like there's more like emotional range in our experiences. There's like kind of nuances in the way we talk to each other. And so there was all of those things, were kind of, you could argue they're downsides. But for me, I just realized like, this is a video game. It's not trying to be anything other than a video game. It didn't really bother me, But like, overall, I thought the writing was it was fine. I think like the writing got the job done. It wasn't like anything insane, but it wasn't like a bunch of lows, right? I just felt like it was consistently okay, right?
Mhm.
And that might sound like a knock, but I think if I think that's fine. For the type of game Avowed was trying to be, like consistently okay, okay. Like if you're having 8 out of 10, writing overall, like that's fine. You're getting the job done. And like in that game, like the writing is really just a device for you to really think about like the ideological things at play. And really what they're grappling with is like, I remember the director was talking about this. You have your more like grounded, like kind of political like drama, and then you're really having the supernatural, like kind of focusing on souls and like what does it mean if like we're really looking at like kind of souls and their relationship to magic and corruption of the soul and gods and things like that. And so and like animancy, which is like kind of using the science of souls, and I thought that was really fascinating. And there was like parts. This is slight spoilers. All right, but one of the cool things I remember seeing in the game that I thought was cool, right? There was like a part where people are using like animancy, which is like manipulating souls to kind of do something interesting with the undead, right? And I was like, okay, that's kind of an interesting thing I never thought about. So those things were good. Now, how would I compare it to Dragon Age, right? Because that's what you would ask me. I think Dragon Age has more highs and lows. Like if Obsidian, like the writing is more often like an 8, like a 7 or an 8. Like there's parts of Dragon Age where I think the writing is like a 9 or a 10. Like I
That's
really
insane.
thought the writing was great. But then there's also times where I think the writing in Dragon Age is like a 2 or a 3.
That's kind of also insane.
So like you're really like going from these like drastic highs and lows. So like the companions to me in Dragon Age were better. Like
Okay.
I didn't like the Kunari, the Dragon Lady, and I think some of the
Just a hater.
other what was that
It's just a hater.
partly, and I think like the assassin wasn't the greatest either.
That's
But
good.
like other characters were great. Like pretty much everyone loves the Necromancer.
Yeah, the Necromancer.
That was great. The Griffin Warden. Most people really like that character as well. I really liked Harding, which was the dwarf female. Like I thought she was a great character. I romanced Bella, which was like the elf girl. I know. My wife was like, "What are you doing?" But so I thought the companions were actually pretty good. Even though that narrative was also kind of predictable, there was actually a couple of twists that happened later on, and I was like, I actually didn't see that coming. Maybe it's because I underestimated Dragon Age so much, and some of the later development, I was like, well, that's kind of interesting.
Right.
Okay, all right, Dragon Age. And so, and one thing in particular that happens later on, I'm like, oh man, this is epic. But then because there's these moments where the writing is just like the most trash writing you've ever seen, it's like, and now that I really think about it, like when you try and make your characters like lifelike, like in interactions that we have, if that works, then you're like, oh my god, you're elevating your game. But if you're trying to make something lifelike, but then all of a sudden the next scene it feels like HRs in every moment,
Yeah.
because really that's how I would describe some of those moments.
Sounds so.
And the reason I say that is because there's no tension. No
Yeah.
one is getting mad at each other, and that's why these characters feel like robots.
Yeah.
Then it's just so much more jarring because you're just like, okay, I had an experience that felt more lifelike here, and now I have something where it's like clearly these people have no tension. So like, do they even have emotions? It's too jarring, so it's hard to say. Like, I can't really say which one is better. Like, I think Avowed uses its writing to accomplish its tasks better.
Fair.
Because like the writing doesn't necessarily become an impediment to what it's trying to accomplish. For me, for Dragon Age, even though I thought the writing was overall better in Dragon Age, the fact that the choice and consequence was really not there, there was no tension when it came to the companion interactions and things like that. I feel like the writing was more of a hindrance when it came to Dragon Age. So then, in that sense, I think for the artistic goals of both of the teams, I think Obsidian probably did a better job.
That's fair. It's a fair criticism. I mean, the game for me, unfortunately, I want to play it, but I feel like if it was the game of the month and everyone was talking about it, I would have dropped everything I was playing right now just to try it. But I think I'm going to wait a bit. I mean, again, 80 is a very respectable number and open critic. That means people are still thinking there's something worth playing there, and it's more than just polished. Like, it's more than just gameplay mechanics. Like, to me, when I played Hellblade Senua 2 or whatever, there was like something there, but the story really just didn't hit a beat for me,
They're both 81s on Open Critic.
which is kind of crazy.
But I get your point. I know what you mean.
But with Avowed, I think there's something here to play. I'm just gonna prioritize a little lower now on my
So
list.
to me, Avowed is just it's a fun time. Like it's not trying to be more than what it is. Like it's really just trying to be a fun time.
Right.
And I feel like nowadays you have games that are really trying to push the envelope, like Baldur's Gate, I would say Kingdom Come Deliverance tried to push the envelope in its own way. I would say Cyberpunk did. They failed at first, but then they succeeded later. So they're really trying to push the RPG forward. I feel like Obsidian is just trying to make a warm, comfy game that you have fun with. And for them, like, they just want to make essentially a bunch of AA games.
Yeah.
They want to be able to
That's their
make
identity
multiple
right now.
games, and they're happy with that.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
great.
this kind of goes into my next point, with the state of the industry, like, can you really blame them? If you see, like, for instance, BioWare taking the type of swings that they did with Dragon Age, remember we talked about that so much. Like, I'm still kind of a BioWare fanboy, and I hope the best for them. But like you said, a lot of people are like, man, BioWare, you've let us down so many times.
Yeah.
Like, come on now,
It's...
And that's so valid, right? Because they really have burnt so many tries now. And it's because they're taking these huge swings, Like, now you have to wait another 5-6 years, and then who knows if the next game is going to be that good. Now look at Obsidian, like, let's say I was actually satisfied about, for me, what I was hoping to get, I got. It's not as good as I really hoped it would be. I was expecting more of like an 85 or a 90 type game, and I agree it's more of an 80. But it gets the job done. And the thing is, even if you're upset and you're like, oh my God, Avowed is the worst game ever, the writers all suck in Obsidian, fire everyone, they're literally making another game later this year.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you summarized it well. So it's like Obsidian kind of is coming out saying, we know only how to hit fastballs. Like, it's like baseball terms. Like, we don't know how to hit curveballs. We don't know these really slow balls. We can hit fastballs. And they've been so consistent where they've output now, like, 5 games last 6 years. That
and they just want to be consistent,
Well, we know what to expect now. And I feel like if they ever release a game that ends up being better than expectations, because we now know where to set them, we'll be like, holy shit, they delivered and more. So I think...
Well, I feel like, if I don't know if this is pushing back, but I feel like that kind of happened to them because I would say Pentiment and Grounded over-delivered for them. I think most people think that those games are better than they expected. And so I think they basically expected Avowed to be like Skyrim or better. Like,
interesting take.
And I think, like, people expected Avowed to be really good. They expected to be like 90s because they're like, Obsidian is great. They have Microsoft money. We're taking Obsidian to the next level. And Obsidian was like, we don't necessarily want to go to the next level you think we need to be at. We just want to make, like, cool games and keep making them.
Well, I also feel like that people have a lot of nostalgia and they look at Fallout New Vegas as this game that was like, oh my God, the pinnacle of Fallout. But in reality, it's like, it was a great game, but it wasn't as good as people think.
Didn't people hate Fallout New Vegas?
When it first came out,
I swear that the year it came out, I'm pretty sure everyone was saying Fallout 3 is the best and New Vegas sucks.
Yes.
And now everyone loves New Vegas.
They look at it so favorably. Like, oh my God. So also that, I think, okay, Pentiment and Grounded over delivers. Then you're looking at now this old game more favorably than it once was. And you go, yeah, now Avowed expectations are up here. In reality, it's at the same level polish and output that all the other games were. So in my opinion, if Outer Worlds comes out and they over deliver on that, it'll be a pleasant surprise. I don't expect it to be. I expect it to be another 80.
I actually think, we'll go on record for this one, I think Outer Worlds 2 is going to score higher. Because I think people don't have as many expectations for it. I think because it's a sequel, like, they already know what works and they can expand on things. And I think they're going to, like, take some of the learnings from Avowed, right? Like, especially the polish. Because for me, I didn't like about Outer Worlds. It's too janky for me. I couldn't beat it.
Yeah, I couldn't.
And I didn't feel like the map design wasn't great to me. I felt like it was pretty vertical and I was just going for long periods of time and then my frame rate wouldn't be great. And then I would run into some people and the combat wasn't the best. So that's why I couldn't beat the game. But the choice and consequences to me were better than Avowed. So I feel like they're going to take the good learnings from Avowed and then translate that into the skeleton of Outer Worlds 2. And I think it's probably going to score like an 84, 85.
It's hard to tell because if these games are being developed in parallel, you don't have that much more time to take the good that you're hearing from the game.
That's so true.
Say,
and that's another thing I've been wondering about because I don't know what the team setup looks like for them. But
was it A team and B team? Was it A team and A team?
But to me, it's kind of like when I look at the Final Fantasy teams, like if you have a team now where like you made Final Fantasy 14 and now they made Final Fantasy 16 and now they're doing their own niche. You got that 7 team, right, doing, that trilogy. And like, they're all kind of growing in their own ways. And there's almost like kind of like an internal competition, but like in a fun way, I feel like I'm kind of seeing that with Obsidian. And, I mean, I don't know if you've been seeing it on the corners of the internet, but I kind of wonder about all the backlash for DEI, and obviously
Yeah.
like the director is female, but
Yeah.
like to me, I think she's a great director, and like she's totally like she's really into pillars, and you could
Okay.
tell like they didn't just like throw her there because they had like to fill some sort of checklist. Like
It's good.
she's really into
You
pillars.
just want the talent. You want the right people.
And so to me, I'm like, all right, we already know. I think it's Josh Shore, right?
Sorry.
Yeah, so he's the guy who made
Mm.
Pentiment, and so to me, he's probably seems like kind of like their big guy, you
Yeah.
know. But now if they're like internally growing other side teams, and now if we're gonna an Avowed team and they're making Avowed 1 and 2 or something like in the Pillars universe, now we have the Outer Worlds team making stuff. I don't know what Josh Sawyer is working on.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like and then essentially you almost have like 3 teams that are all making like their own, if you want to call them double A projects,
Yeah.
that do seem fairly polished. Like I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I find it interesting. This is one of their biggest. You could almost say Obsidian was their best pickup. It's kind
I
of
think so, yeah.
if I have to compare to Sony, it's like Insomniac. Insomniac's output has been so insane, and they were so cheap to get at the time.
And Insomniac has gotten better with time too, because
Yeah,
I loved Ratchet and Clank, but like to me, there's been a quality jump between like the Ratchet and Clank games in the PS2 and then
Yeah.
the PS3,
Yo,
and the
yeah,
PS4, and then the
massive.
PS5.
and then it really came to head when they remade Ratchet and Clank for the PS4, and they really showed what they were capable of. And prior to that, they were making VR games.
And I feel like when they actually went into other genres, like the entire studio grew after they had their learnings from Resistance, after they had
Resistance,
their and then Spider-Man, I feel like all of that has just helped them create like a certain standard, for their studio. And to me, for Obsidian, like I kind of see the same thing, And if really we're saying Avowed is the worst game, and everyone is like, oh, it's the death of Obsidian, and it's an 81 on OpenCritic, and this is what you're saying is like your failure for a team that's made games and has been delivering for years.
They've developed so many different games in different genres. So again, Grounded, Pentiment, Avowed, now Outer Worlds, like they're all different games.
And so I was actually, I think you said this in joking the other day when we were talking about it, but I actually thought some more about it, and I don't know if it's actually a joke. Like there was an interview that they had with IGN, like the team of Avowed, and they asked, "Are you going to make Fallout New Vegas too?" And
oh yeah,
Ryan always has to ask it. They kind of swiveled away from the question a little bit, but I think it was the studio head was like, there's a game with a backlog catalog for Xbox, for Microsoft that I'm interested in, and you joked that, oh, what if it's Banjo Kazooie? And I was like, look, I would normally think that was ridiculous because they make RPGs, but they made Grounded. Right?
Well, because everyone keeps saying, "Oh, it makes more sense for Double Fine to make Banjo Kazooie," but it's like, you know what? Obsidian could actually. But
Double Fine would make a great Banjo, but I almost wonder if they don't want to do it because they're like, okay, the hype is there, the intention is there, and I feel like they're kind of those like hippie indie, like you know what I mean, like that type of vibe. And I don't know if they really want to try and make those like really polished like games that like deliver on like an old franchise like Perfect Dark,
Right.
like people are gonna have Banjo at like such a high pedigree. Sure. I kind of feel like Double Fine is like, we'd rather just do our own thing because so many people have pointed that out to them, and or they said like, why don't you do a Psychonauts 3? And they're like, we're just kind of doing our own thing.
We're just doing our thing.
So it's gonna happen would have happened by now. And then if they were gonna like find like a third party team to do it, they would have went to Toys for Bob. And it sounds to me that Toys for Bob is going to be busy, probably doing something with Spyro or Crash. So, and they're not even under the Microsoft umbrella anymore. So I don't think they're going to go there. What other big platform teams are there? There really is not that many, So at this point, like, I think you kind of consider going to someone outside of your general wheelhouse. And, if they gave Fable to Playground, giving Banjo to Obsidian, and like I mean Obsidian delivered with South Park. I would have never thought South Park Stick of Truth would be good.
Insane, because then you have someone like Ubisoft that takes over and says, "Oh, we already have the formula from them. Let's make a sequel," and it doesn't deliver. Yeah. Like what was it? Fractured Butthole,
which is still hilarious.
It's a hilarious name, but like you already have something to build on, and they still couldn't deliver.
Stick of Truth was so freaking good, and I remember I played the whole game, and like I bought it because I love South Park. I wasn't expecting a good game,
and I remember you talking.
And I played the whole game, and I was like,
"This is amazing."
Who in the world made this game? Because like normally when I think of these like TV show or movie tie-ins, like I think they're gonna be trash. Like you know. And
Right.
then all of a sudden I was like, it was Obsidian. I was like, what?
You know, it's fun. It's been on my list for so long. I think I'm gonna play it this year. I keep forgetting about
Well,
it.
South Park Stick of Truth.
Yeah.
But it is one of the funniest games ever. I miss games like that. Like it is not trying to be more than what it is, and it's a turn based game.
It's so weird.
It's such a weird
I've
turn based
seen-
game,
I've
but it's
seen-
like a good amount of strategy
I've
you have to
seen some
put in.
gameplay and like, isn't there that one part where you're like in a strip club with like fat strippers or something?
Oh, I don't even remember.
It's something weird, and you're killing these.
Honestly, I feel like that's a game that I would play again just for shits and giggles, just for fun, because like with that type of graphic, those type of graphics, that doesn't like go bad, you know,
Yeah.
with time, because it looks just like
Well, it's
the
also
video
funny
game,
because when
the TV show.
they released that game, this was right around the time I think PS4 and Xbox One was coming out, and so the show itself then had a whole episode about the console wars, and it was like this whole tie-in.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
So
I remember
funny.
that. That was
So-
a hilarious episode
yeah.
too. And so I say that because I mean I really don't know where Obsidian is going to go next, but I mean they've already said like they're happy
Yeah.
with their sales, and they said that early on. So like everyone's raging online. At the end of the day, like
There's nothing
if they're
to worry
happy
about.
and they're making more games, and you know there are ways to me that Avowed is a disappointment, but overall like I'm happy.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't think. I think they're going to be untouched. I think Microsoft won't do anything to them, and
Oh, yeah.
that's where I want to kind of pivot this conversation because there's been some news as of today and as of recently about things we just learned about in the industry. One is that Fable's been delayed now, which is unfortunate because I was really looking forward.
I
to
was
that
so
game
looking forward to
holiday.
that. And now I mean Grand Theft Auto, you know,
Yeah.
but I don't know what
It's-
Sony's releasing in the second half either. So like in terms of the big three exclusive.
Well,
Big three platformers. I don't know what exclusives we're gonna get.
yeah, so it's interesting because they announced this delay. They say 2026. They don't have a specific window, but they show pre-alpha gameplay. So it's like kind of crazy to me that Microsoft last year would be like, yeah, 2025, and you're still pre-alpha,
Pre-alpha in
And it's like,
2025. Yeah, I thought the same thing, and I was like,
what?
"How is this pre-alpha?"
Yeah, like
And it looks good. You know, I will say like. I thought it looked great, but I thought the animations need a little work,
It
you know,
does, it
which
definitely
makes
does.
sense for pre-alpha. I mean, the game to me almost looked like it was a little bit more than a year out. Like, because normally you take the best of what you have,
Yes.
you know, and for a game that is to me seems like the scope of Fable, you know, like I just expected like if you think you have a year out, like you need like 6 to 9 months of just polishing. Like
Yeah.
your game should pretty much be done.
Well, wait a minute. When was the last time they showed the Fable trailer? Was that last year?
Yeah, in the summer showcase.
Bro, so you're telling me in June of last year, they're like, yeah, we're going to hit 25. And then 8 months later.
Way too
you're like,
optimistic.
Yeah,
I think
that
that's
was
way
dumb.
too optimistic.
See, but this goes right back up to Phil, in my opinion. I don't give a fuck if you're the CEO or if you're the head of Xbox Studios. You have to look at that and be like, tell me a realistic date. Don't be like, let's stop with 2025.
So I think what's happening, if I'm doing, you know, the number crunching in my head, I don't feel like they tack on the 6 months you need for polish or the 3 or 6 months you need for
Right, it
polish.
must
Because
be
if you
like-
think about like they were like, oh, Avowed is ready to go at the end of last year, right? And
Content complete. But
content
not
complete, and then
polished.
like all of a sudden it's coming out now. And when you look at like the developers, they actually did a lot of work in the last 4 months.
Yeah.
We rehauled, you know, our balancing,
Audio,
we
sorts of shit.
you know, and they rehauled the graphics and the
Yeah.
combat and the performance. They added a new performance mode.
Yeah.
And now it's where it's at, and they're still releasing tons of patches,
Right.
tons of bug fixes, you know? And now I would say after all 3 major big patches that came out, the game is in a good state. And Microsoft was like, oh yeah, we're good. We're just
Yeah.
clearing this out, you know, because it's too stacked. I'm
Yeah,
like, what?
what?
Like, all of these games sound like they need like 3 to 6 months more
Yeah.
of polish. And like even with Starfield,
Oh my
they
God.
basically had to throw the whole kitchen sink to make
Yeah.
sure it's not buggy. And
Yeah.
I played Starfield, I didn't think it was buggy. But like just to show like that should be the standard. That should
Yeah.
not be the exception. That should be the rule.
Yeah.
Like Stalker 2 is an aside because they're in a war, you know, so I can't even believe the game released in the state it did. And I can understand why they had to release it
Yeah.
when they did, because the studio head was basically saying like, honestly, like we are in war and we just needed something.
Yeah,
we really need to
that's
get
fair.
this game out. But
Like-
all of these games, essentially, like they need to cook for like 3 to 6 more months.
Yeah, but see, this is the problem. Like with Fable, it made no sense to announce it last year, and that window, even what they showed was so bare minimum because what we had saw was basically almost what we had saw years prior. And this wasn't a pitch to get more developers to help them. They're well past
Yeah,
that
they're good.
stage. The prototyping.
They're basically just trying to keep us happy.
Yeah, and they should have shown it this summer, but people would have said, "Oh, another year of no Fable. It's in dire state," and they probably didn't want all that like talk to be.
They want all that negative talk around
Yeah.
Fable.
But it's like that's where they fucked up in my look. Don't get me wrong. Sony does the same thing. They announced Wolverine in 2020,
Way too early,
and it's 2025, and we don't even know what the fuck is going on.
So I get it, but like now that I say that, like I have less confidence. Not that Fable's going to be bad. I think Fable's going to be terrific, but I'm just like fingers crossed. Release this game when it's ready. Do not release it early, and especially if you're getting good sentiment. Like, hey, there's a lot of divisive opinions upon the last couple of games that Microsoft has released. But if we're trying to go to objective measures like OpenCritic, pretty much all of the recent releases have scored well. Like I know how we feel about Hellblade, right? But still 81, Avowed 81. I think Indiana Jones was like 86 or 87. Stalker 2 was a little bit lower, but I mean they're in a war, and like
I give them a lot of grace.
I give them a lot of grace for that. And honestly, after the most recent patch, from what I'm reading online, like the game is actually running in a much better state. The AI is a lot better. So, Microsoft, like they're actually getting a lot better consistency, right? And so like now I don't feel as afraid of like a Redfall, And so it's like, and if you have all these Activision and Bethesda games, releasing, on Xbox Game Pass, just let them cook. Let them cook. Even if it's like late 2026, 2027, I'm fine with that.
It's funny because they have now an overabundance of games, and they still don't know how to handle it. So like, we don't know how to space these games apart, when to announce them and when to show them. It's like, bro, how is it always so difficult for Microsoft to get this shit
Microsoft
right?
Always, and actually that brings up a good point because the ID at Xbox game, showcase. I was looking at that showcase and I was like, man, some of these games are certified bangers, and I feel like if this was PlayStation, like they would literally just like rest on one game for 3 months.
Yeah, I know.
Like we were looking at Jump Ship and I was like, Jump Ship looks like a game that you could just market heavily and like make it like your summer event, or that Mecha Break game. Like it already has how many people playing on it in Steam, and like I feel like if Sony was like the one who's really marketing that, like it would be like their game for like for the 2 months. And I guess maybe this is a good problem for Microsoft to have, but like Microsoft doesn't really even need to like advertise them because they have so many other things to advertise.
There's so many now that games are going to get lost in the weeds again. So you just talked about it. It's a great example, but Sony at the State of Play announced Lost Soul Aside, which they're now going to heavily market in the next 3 months. And they're like, that's why they didn't show Ghost of Yotai. They didn't show Death Stranding.
They're just going to focus on that. And then that's going to help them like, make good money on that, And like with Microsoft, like they'll like if Microsoft had Lost Souls Aside, they would probably treat it in the same way they're treating Wu-Chang.
Yeah.
Which is like, we're really into Wu-Chang. I'm really into Wu-Chang because like, oh man, this seems like pretty high quality. But we're only getting like a little bit of buzz here and there. We're getting a little bit of trailer here and there. If Sony had Wu-Chang, it would be front and center. And they would be like, we don't want to even talk to you about Ghost of Yotai. We're going to act like nothing else exists. So all of your attention will be on this game.
And it's actually funny. Microsoft has another good example of this, and I think this is where they might fuck it up, but they've done so far a great job of showing it off, is Ninja Gaiden 4. So I actually rewatched. So after the State of Play was done, they released Team Ninja released their own video. It was like 11 minutes. And I watched the whole thing. I was like, holy shit. Now that I'm comparing it to Ninja Gaiden Black 2, 4 looks so amazing. And I'm just like, they need to market this whole year and like put everything else aside.
That's the thing. And like that's what Sony and Nintendo are so good at. Like they make their releases feel like events. And they like kind of like, stop the noise on everything else. And they like make all of the critical attention go on one thing. Like, look, I understand that like you had so many other things that are like, coming out in the first 6 months, but like Avowed just kind of just dropped. It just kind of showed up, And like I had a blast with that game, but like it didn't feel like an event in the same way. And if like Sony is making an event out of like a game that we didn't even know anything about, like we don't know anything really about the studios making Lost Souls Aside or Tides of Annihilation, but people are still getting hyped about it, because like Sony finds a way to really make it an event. Even showing off Onimusha, or showing off Borderlands 4, like. I just feel like Sony really does a great job at market. That's really been their strategy. I think, like you said, Microsoft is getting much better at this. Like, the way that they've been treating South of Midnight, they've been doing a much better job. But we'll see. And I just feel like some of those other games, they go under the radar as a result. I remember when I was looking back at exclusives that came out for the last generation for Xbox, and I was looking at what game really did well and overperformed. Like, I just remembered, I was like, oh yeah, Microsoft had Deep Rock Galactic. Deep Rock Galactic did great numbers, and it was out for a while, but I feel like people didn't have that association, like, oh, this is like an Xbox game.
Yeah, like there, yeah, that association.
Or like Gears Tactics, that game
Dude,
reviewed
I
well.
know.
It was like an 83 on
Dude.
OpenCritic, and it's like,
dude, I
got lost
love,
in the wind.
I love Gears of War. I barely saw any marketing for Gears Tactics, and still to this day I haven't played it. And it's
Gears
on my
Tactics is
list,
fun.
and I'm going to play it. But like me, I was the biggest Gears of War fan.
Man, you would love Gears Tactics. You
That's what I'm
really
saying.
would love Gears Tactics.
And I'm gonna play it.
Oh, then like think about this. Like everyone is like, oh, you know, we didn't really get anything from like, you know, Gears, or, you know, like in the first year of the Xbox series, we didn't really have anything. Why is it that Ghost of Tsushima makes that other Ghost of Iki Island, and it feels like an event, and then Gears makes Gears Hive Busters,
You know,
and
like,
that doesn't really get the same traction.
Well, not even just Iki Island or whatever it was called. They announced a multiplayer mode, which came out later, and was, oh fuck!
They really know how to get people talking, and so now in hindsight, there's actually a lot of like, or Warhammer 40k Dark Tag. I just feel like that game actually was pretty solid. It reviewed pretty well.
We played it. It actually felt fun.
We played it. It felt fun, but it just didn't have that same staying power and attention. And I feel like a part of it is how to properly generate and manage the buzz around a game before release and keep it going after it comes out.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to do, but it's the way you get it across to whether it's people that stream online or whatever way you market it to be like, guys, we want you all to talk about it because your fan base will talk about it, your friends will talk about it, your families will talk about it. Like, dude, the Pokemon Presents that was just announced a couple days ago for the 27th, it's a yearly thing that happens every 27th of February. I was reading online how people were like, yeah, my wife just told me that there was a Pokemon Presents. She has no idea what the hell a Pokemon Presents is. And like to see people...
That word of mouth spreading.
Yeah, word of mouth
crazy.
Spreading. It's like, dude.
And I was just thinking about this, like last year, it's crazy to think that this was already last year. Wow, where did the year go? But Pal World, right? Yeah. Right, you know, that came out of nowhere, and that was like an Xbox launch exclusive, right? And man, look at, like, I imagine that did some numbers for Xbox, right? In Game Pass. And you kind of have, to me, on paper, what could be like a breakout success like that, like Mecha Break, you know? Yeah. And I really had to go out of my way to realize that, oh man, Mecha Break is a console launch exclusive on Xbox. I didn't even realize that.
I didn't realize that at all. Yeah, it's strange. I think it's a good problem to have. It's just that if you don't fix that, there's going to be games like Gears Tactics that just get lost in the wind.
Exactly.
And then your long-term fans that don't play, not only will they not touch it, then the developers say, we'll never take a chance again on this because it didn't sell well.
Yeah, and like, I don't know what the numbers are, but like, I hope Age of Mythology is doing well. You know, like we told, you know, if I was 5 or 10 years younger, I'd be all over that. But like right now, it's hard for me to get into an RTS, but like, that's a solid game, you know? But it just gets kind of forgotten.
Yeah. Also, it's interesting, speaking of the bad news and things happening in the industry, another thing we learned today was that WB Games has closed down a couple of studios, and one of them being Monolith, which was utterly shocking. Just to kind of preface this, there was a report that came out by Bloomberg about a week ago that said Monolith was working on a Wonder Woman game for the last 3 years. They had already spent $100 million as part of their budget, and nothing came to fruition. Essentially, they didn't like where it was going. It was incorporating their patented or Nemesis system, and I think the director may have left just recently or something like that. And so there was also reports from Bloomberg saying we might not only see this game, but even if it comes out, it might not have the Nemesis system by the time it comes out. So it was interesting to hear that, and then all of a sudden a week later, Warner Brothers says we're closing it down.
You know, I'm really happy you finally brought this up because I've actually been wanting to talk to you for a while, and I feel like we keep getting lost on tangents. Yeah. But man, I was not expecting that. That was a gut punch. And I remember back in the days how hyped we were at the idea of Microsoft buying up the studio, you know, and like, oh my God, what happens if they have all of that, you know, all of those great developers? And man, these are good studios, you know.
Very good.
And I really need a Jason Schreier report to like find out what happened there. Like, what went wrong?
Well, now you know he's going to probably dig even deeper now because there's more to the story. Because
who was unhappy with it? Was it Warner Brothers? Was it like the actual like leader of the studio? Like, was it administration? Like, what happened?
It's got to be Warner Brothers. It's got to be David Zaslav or whatever the hell his name is, the CEO of Warner Brothers. Because here's where I look at it. It was there was rumors last year that Warner Brothers were shopping around all their studios because they said, hey, this is too expensive to make video games. cost hundreds of millions of billions of dollars, and then all of a sudden they said, "Oh, you know what? We're not going to sell anymore. We're going to double down." And you know what? It was obvious, in my opinion. What I think happened was they shopped around and was like, "We might be interested." And because there was rumors that Microsoft wanted to purchase Rocksteady, and they go, "Wait a minute. The only reason why your developers are valuable is because of your IP. Oh, you're not licensing or selling your IP with it too?
Yeah.
Then we don't give a flying
Yeah,
fuck
because
about
the
your
thing is, then
developers."
you have to pivot to like something else, and
Yeah.
like there's no guarantee that like even if it's a good game, like what if it just doesn't
Yeah.
attract a fan base?
Yeah, exactly. And if you have to license out the IP, people are going to say, just like Disney is, right? We have to pay you a massive cut and hope that the game sells well.
Yeah.
You know, just like how Disney's.
I feel like at that point, Microsoft is probably going to be like, if I am just like leaning on the strength of your IP name, why don't I just cut you a deal and put it on Game Pass?
Yeah, well, I'll just put on Game Pass instead, which they tried to do actually with Suicide Squad Kill Justice League when it first came out. They almost had a deal like $200 million a year just to get that on Game Pass.
Oh my god, can you imagine?
They're probably happy they didn't do that. But if I look at it from
probably played a demo.
Yeah.
They're
like,
we're good. I mean, they paid off for Gotham Knights, right?
They did. What's funnier though is that there's other reports. NetEase has now been pulling back on all of its international studios. And one big thing is, this is the craziest thing. They already announced that like 50 million people play Marvel Rivals, which is now a huge game. But guess what? They're like, the reason why they wanted to potentially close the game down before it even launched is because they didn't pay the fees to Disney for licensing. And you know what? They're probably still not making much money because there's barely any microtransactions in the game. They're like, fuck, this game's popular, but it's not making as
But you know, Disney
money.
is asking for an insane amount of money.
Yes,
for that.
exactly.
Absolutely.
So when I look at Warner Brothers,
and like that game, I mean, it seems like it's a pretty good game by all means, but like, you know, it's kind of similar to Overwatch, and I feel like if it wasn't for the Marvel characters,
then it wouldn't be. And that's what NetEase actually said. The report from, I think, Bloomberg as well again said they were considering just making the game without the Marvel IP. It would not have done as well as done. There's just no way. And it's funny because my friends have played Marvel's Rivals and they love it. They like, this is fucking the shit. We don't. They
because if you get to play Overwatch, but like now you're playing with like the most beloved characters, like that's dope.
It's dope. And you know, again, I look at from this angle with Warner Brothers. It's like you now know for sure, 100% Rocksteady is on its last leg. You just lost your co-creator and your two co-owners of the studio who formed the studio 20 some years ago. They left. They're gone.
Suicide Squad did not work out for you.
Yeah, they're now getting a chance to probably make another Batman game. But if that fucking fails, if that doesn't sell 10 plus million,
but that's the unfair thing too, because like they, you know, even if it's a success, like it has to be a huge success, you know, because like, you know, they want to see that money, you know, like it's not enough for just that studio to stay afloat. Like they need to see the big return, or else they're gonna make their calculations. They're gonna be like, well, if we're not making $100 million profit on this game, it might not be worth taking a swing in the future, because what if it's a negative 100 in the future?
That's exactly it. Because again, you think about it this way: the reason they're doing Batman most likely, because that's what the rumors are from Bloomberg again, is that they're trying to have this synergy with their movies now. And they go, look, we're making a Batman Part 2 with Matt Reeves. We're making a Batman Brave and the Bold film. And all of this kind of just jives. The reason why they probably also canceled Wonder Woman was because the last movie was horrible. They were considering making a Flash
game.
People
aren't paying as much attention to Wonder Woman right now. And like with the reboot, who knows what Wonder Woman is going to be like in 2-3 years.
We don't know. And the Flash movie, they considered making a Flash game while the Flash movie was being released with Ezra Miller. And because it flopped so hard, they decided to cancel that. That's what everyone's been asking for. And I feel like they have opportunities to pivot a little bit, but they're not going to take a risk anymore. Yeah. Batman's been tried and true. That sold 30 million units between 3 games, which actually isn't a lot when you think about it. It's one of the best superhero games. It only sold 30 million between 3 games. It's kind of not as much as I thought. But it's sad to see this because they're talented developers, and I hope they end up somewhere else. But
that is so sad to see. And like, I mean, this is the thing. Like, I feel like everyone is out for blood when it comes to like, you know, games underperforming, or like, oh, we expect these games to like reach like, you know, this threshold. But like, man, like I was saying in the last, you know, podcast, sometimes I'm just happy like these studios are still alive and making games, because there's no guarantee in this world right now. Like, you know, who I would have never thought 10 years ago, like this many people would be cut. And like, I feel like what feels unfair to me is like, okay, if Rocksteady got cut, it would be a big gut punch for everybody, right? Because of Arkham, but they'd be like, all right, you know, Suicide Squad, okay, I can see that. Yeah. But Monolith, everyone loved the Lord of the Rings games.
That's
what
I'm saying.
And like, I feel like Warner Brothers has been trying to make Lord of the Rings a thing ever since the original trilogy, and they made money on the Hobbit movies, but I think everyone says they really weren't as good.
Yeah.
I don't think the animated movie did that great.
Yeah.
You know how Rings of Power is, and we've talked a lot about how you feel about Rings of Power. And so it just never felt like there was anything super exciting that was happening with that franchise, which is a shame because like I freaking love Lord of the Rings. It's like my favorite thing. And then you had Shadow of Mordor, and then
it's like,
and then
and it sold millions of copies.
and then it's like, oh my god.
And it has the action of Batman, and it has the Nemesis system, which is so unique in a game.
And it's like, that's so dope, and it's like, that studio that had like such a high pedigree, like they haven't released a bad game.
Yeah. Well,
and I guess I understand Wonder Woman didn't work out, but it's like,
give them a chance. Like look, it's like My Have the Mighty Fallen. It's like you had two studios who were so renowned, and then they didn't output something in 5 to 10 years. And now their former shell themselves. One is closed down. I'm telling you, Rockstar, no matter how the next Batman game does, I think they're going to get shut down.
I really wish Microsoft had bought them out.
I really do too. They could have been used for something. So, because look, think about it this way: if Rocksteady was already pivoting to make a different game, they didn't even want to make Suicide Squad. They're like, we just want to make a brand new game that isn't based on a DC IP. If you had just bought them out and said, we'll let you do whatever the fuck you
Microsoft
want.
would have been fine with them making a AA game and just doing it on Game Pass. Like Microsoft would have been fine with, you don't need like a AAA game that's costing you $200 million.
And if they had that freedom, I don't think the owners of the studio would have left. They said, oh, we actually have our freedom. I'm just like Obsidian is like, we can still make what we want, Pentiment, etc. You would have probably gotten that for Rocksteady. I don't know if the expectations would have been super high. Would they have paid a lot for them? Maybe. But I think they would have split them up enough to be like, you have a small team here that can make something. You can have the big A team make something.
I just feel like this is just Warner Brothers. Think about Harry Potter. They are remaking Harry Potter. And I think it was the CEO, he was saying, hey, have people forgotten? Like Lord of the Rings is our franchise. And Harry Potter is our franchise. And I think now they're seeing what Disney is doing with Star Wars, and they're just trying to do the same thing. Yeah. They're just trying to milk it,
Well, David Zaslav, whatever his last name is, he came out and said, we're doubling down on Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Mortal Kombat, and DC properties. So I'm kind of surprised because Mortal Kombat's good. It's been good for the last several years. They're making another movie. It's coming out this fall. Fine. Harry Potter makes sense.
I mean, Hogwarts Legacy was a really good game, and it makes sense for them to pivot into that and make that the big trilogy. I totally get why they would lean into that.
You should just keep making sequels to that game. It's clear there's an appetite. Game of Thrones, weird because...
Who is going to make their Game of Thrones games?
Well, that's what's confusing to me. It's like you had 10 plus years to capitalize on this fucking series, and now you want to do it
after Game of Thrones is done. Why didn't you start development of a game for Game of Thrones in the middle of Game of Thrones?
Yeah, that's exactly.
And the writer for Game of Thrones really helped on Elden Ring.
Yeah, so you could have easily had
this guy literally knows his stuff. Why didn't you have the actual writer help you make a good game?
And now, which is even weirder, Monolith, again, great developers, you can have them just pivot to Game of Thrones instead.
And like all of these, like, okay, they came up with like 5 story ideas for like different, spin-offs for Game of Thrones and like the universe. Why don't you take any of those and make it a game?
Yeah. Why is it so difficult? This is what I'm
confused
about.
You've been sitting on these ideas for years. And then you like greenlight these like spin-off shows, and then you cancel them,
Well, so here's the funny part. Now, this is where there's a lot of disconnect in Warner Brothers because the DCU specifically. So you have 2 CEOs. You have James Gunn, and then I'm already forgetting the other guy. But they're actually doing something right. They're looking at all their properties. They're like, some of this is going to be a movie. Some of them is going to be an animated show. Some of them are going to be live action shows. And some of them are going to just be games. And they go, whatever makes the most sense for the medium. And they go, if someone comes to us with a shitty script, we're not greenlighting it. And I actually
Thank God.
But I think that's perfect because they're taking a look at everything very critically. But I think from a very high standpoint, their actual CEO of Warner Brothers is like, he has no idea what he's doing. And he's more from the discovery side. And that's why this kind of makes sense that he literally knows nothing.
I mean, that's why like you kind of have to do cross media, because the thing is, if you're in the same media, like people are going to have those associations and they're going to compare, and they're going to be like, okay, Game of Thrones, we're constantly going to compare House of the Dragon to it.
You're just gonna...
and a lot of times it's really hard for prequels or sequels to like the most beloved franchise, to stack up. But when you go cross, media, then you don't have to fight those associations as much.
Yeah.
Like, how many people are taking the story of Shadow of Mordor and War of Mordor, and then they're like, oh yeah, like this story the writing is not as good as the original trilogy,
Yeah,
so I hate
they
it.
never say that.
No, they're like, I can appreciate the Nemesis, system.
Yeah.
I can appreciate the differences in it,
Yeah.
right?
And the games sit on their own. Like,
Exactly, and then they stand on their own better. So like, think about Harry Potter. Like, Hogwarts Legacy did good for a reason.
and it
It's
adds
because
more to the lore.
I would argue that if Hogwarts Legacy was just a TV show
Yeah.
or a movie, it would not have done as well. Like Fantastic Beasts,
Yeah.
and so that's why you want to do something cross media.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's funny because James Gunn just had a interview yesterday, and he dropped some really important updates. He's like, we're canceling 2 or 3 of the movies we greenlit because the draft's no longer good. It was not Clayface. It was called Buster or something. I forget what he said, but he also mentioned that he's now talking to Rocksteady and he's talking to NetherRealms about certain games that they want to make. And so the fact that he's driving that now,
I didn't realize he had an input in the video game side as well.
Now he has full, like, complete kind of almost control about what types of games they get to make. But I like that he's driving that, because maybe and we're gonna get a great now we might not get a Mortal Kombat game. We might get a, I don't know, fucking Game of Thrones fighting. I don't fucking know. But you know what I'm saying?
You need things to be different enough. You know, like even like the new Batman movie, like it was different enough than the Batman before. Like if it's too similar, then people are just not going to be happy. They're going to compare too much. Look at what happened to Star Wars. You know, and like people are so burnt about Star Wars in general. What are the parts of Star Wars that have been really successful? It's like the parts that feel like they're carving out their own niche. Like, to me, the strongest thing are the video games.
Yeah, it's the video games.
Really done the best, and like the TV shows that have done the best, like there was Mandalorian, right? And then Andor. People like Andor has like a similar thread with like rebellion and things like that, but like the vibe of that is so different than like Jedi's running around and chopping people up, right? And so like that's the thing, like, and I feel like a lot of these like higher ups don't always get that, and it's hard because like you don't always know what's going to be that's going to like fill a niche, and you don't know what's going to catch on with an audience. But like I really do want to see more cross media stuff, and this is just a massive hit to me, and I'm just so disappointed, and I really don't know what they're going to make in the future, and I just hope like at some point we get something that's Game of Thrones, or at some point we get something that's Lord of the Rings, especially Lord of the Rings. I want to see that, but I just kind of feel like it's going to be more cuts, and I feel like the only success story we're going to see out of there is probably Hogwarts Legacy.
Yeah, I think that's really the only success, and it's funny because it's coming from a studio that had never developed a game before, so it's like, wow, what a weird turn of events for all these studios. So. Yeah, I think I kind of want to pivot a little more to some shows we've been watching, because I think we've been talking a lot about games. Well, actually, before we do that, I'm going to talk really quickly about this, the Pokemon Presents, because I mentioned this just before. So there's a Pokemon Presents on February 27th. It's pretty annual now. It happens every year. It's been going on for like the last 5 or 6 years. So I just want to talk about this specifically because this has been an odd year for Pokemon, in the sense that 2024 was the first gap year we've had since 2018 or 2019. Where a game wasn't released. And so I think they really are taking it a little more seriously about polishing their games. We're supposed to get information about Pokemon Legends ZA this year, and hopefully we'll see some gameplay. We don't know if it's a cross-gen game yet or not. We'll probably find that out shortly. And supposedly there's some rumors that they're going to announce a new multiplayer game it's codenamed Synapse. So we'll be interesting to see what they show there. They're also having a Pokemon short, like a movie, being released on the 27th. It's about Dragonite. And it's from the creators of Suzume, Your Name.
I saw that. I was like, what in the world? I was like, what is going on? I remember when there was that Netflix Pokemon show. It was like, I was like, this is a great idea. This is just like a feel good, like totally different vibe for Pokemon. Man, Pokemon is expanding in so many ways I never expected. And it's just insane to me. Like even like we all know Pokemon Go, but even like the clocks that Nintendo has, or Pokemon Sleep, it's like, man, these guys.
It's a whole nother beast, and I can understand why they treat it with such special care that it gets a separate direct every year. But it's funny because this anime short looks interesting. It's about this girl who's rides a Dragonite that's like a post carrier or something. Like it delivers like, I don't know, like mail or something. But it's like, it's a weird journey that this girl and this Dragonite, they're experiencing. They're like seeing different Pokemon on their adventure. They're trying to get from location to location.
Do you know when that's coming out?
It's coming out on the 27th on YouTube.
Wait, on YouTube?
Yeah.
The 27th of like
in
Like,
2 days.
2 days? Oh, we're gonna have to watch that.
Yeah, on the day of the direct. So
Suzuki
cool.
was good.
That's why I'm
fire.
excited.
Oh,
So,
man.
and you can already tell the animations look great. The music sounds great.
Do they already have a trailer for it?
Yeah, they have a trailer already.
Oh, I gotta see that. I just saw the poster for it. Like, I saw like an image pop up on my feed, and I was like, oh man,
Yeah,
no way.
they already have a trailer. Check it out.
I actually thought it was fake news at first. Like,
really?
Inside,
I could believe that.
Wait, what? No way.
Yeah,
this is fake news.
When they announced it, I'm like, now I don't know how long it's going to be. It could be a 10-minute thing. It could be a 30-minute thing. It's hard to say, but I'm excited. So that's going to drop on the day of Pokemon Presents. And it's weird that they're doing this now. Does this mean that there's going to be more collaborations in the future? I think so. But again, with the concierge stuff that they did the year prior, I think, in my opinion, I think they're going to announce a new Pokemon movie. That's just my gut feeling.
That would make sense. You think we're going to get like another Detective Pikachu?
I really want to see a sequel to that.
I actually enjoyed that.
I really enjoyed it.
I feel like the choice to put Ryan Reynolds and Ryan Gosling mixed up. Ryan Reynolds. That was a smart choice.
He was very funny as Pikachu. I think the live action Pokemon looked good. Not great, but it was interesting. Story was fun. Like, it was like, hey, Mewtwo. It wasn't
anything amazing, but it was fun.
It was fun. And they can build on it because, again, Pokemon is... Okay, by the way, I don't know if anyone knows this. Pokemon TCG is blowing up, right? You have this mobile app.
I forgot about that. Oh my god, they're making so much money off of that.
So much money off the TCG mobile app, which just launched 3-4 months ago. And it's almost as successful as the actual physical card game.
Which is still amazingly successful. Yeah. It's getting more and more successful as time goes on.
It's blown up in the last several months. If anyone doesn't know, there's a new set that just came out called Prismatic Evolutions. It's so hard to find now. Dude, within seconds of it dropping online or being in stores, people are fighting each other. Like, I've seen videos of people at Costco and Samsung beating the shit out of each other. Gosh. Just to get... These are people in their 40s and 50s.
That's insane. So... What I'm wondering, I'm actually wondering two things. But the first thing I'm wondering, why have they not made a Pokemon world like a Nintendo world?
I know.
Like, why have they not made a Pokemon theme park at Universal?
I know, this is so baffling.
It just seems like such a common sense plan. You know?
I would love to see that as part of Universal. Not like a separate amusement park, but just make it a whole section. You know, people would visit that all the time.
Yeah, I mean... And like, think about how much love there is just for like Mario and like you know, all of those things, and like Pokemon is so loved, and you know how much variety you can have. You can have like a Rayquaza like roller coaster. Exactly. I don't even know Pokemon that well. I can already think of a million things. You have like a freaking Chansey, like place you can get meals and stuff. Like, there's so many things you can do.
We already know that their merchandise sales sell so much and make so much revenue for them that you could just sell that at the amusement park. Here's the plushies. You don't have to make anything Here's the shirts. Yeah, you don't have anything. You can get exclusive cards at the Universal park.
You can literally just take a rundown amusement park and throw a bunch of Pokemon signs everywhere. People love it.
I mean, think about it. When Pokemon Go was still very popular, they were doing these events in Chicago and New York too, and other places where they're like, "Hey, come here to this one day." Everyone would show up and pay $80 to come to a public park, by the way, and be like, "Oh, guess what? We can find great Pokemon here that you normally can't find in our neighborhood." So if you can do that with Pokemon, you can definitely do that for an amusement park.
And the thing, a lot of this gamer culture has gotten like, you know, really mainstream. I would say Marvel has become surprisingly mainstream, but I never expected Pokemon to go as mainstream as it had. I'm always sending you these links, but they had like that pop-up bar in Detroit, you know, on so Bagley. Funny. It was all Pokemon stuff. We took you there, right? Yeah, that was dope. The drinks were so good too. Yeah, that was a blast. The decor was good, and then I know we didn't get a chance to go to it, but they had like a, I think it was like some sort of anime meetup or bar or I don't know, it was an anime rave or whatever. Right. It was like a Pokemon thing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so mainstream.
Yes. It's so nice to know that the one game I started with as a child is so synonymous now with gaming culture and anime.
Oh yeah.
That I can talk to an adult that I've never known before. I'm like, oh,
of course I know Pokemon. Everyone's gonna know Pokemon. Yeah. I guess with me, like, I never played the Pokemon card game growing up. I was so into Yu-Gi-Oh! And to me, I actually thought, like, Pokemon cards, ugh. I was like, those are like wannabe Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. You know, that was like, you know, because Yu-Gi-Oh! Was so big in my school.
Yeah.
And everybody was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! But not everyone was playing Pokemon. Yeah. And so I was like, I'm going to hold on to my Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards for life. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is amazing. And it's like, what happened to Yu-Gi-Oh?
I know,
and like Pokemon has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
It's so funny because the dichotomy, it's like Yu-Gi-Oh! Fell off a cliff, Pokemon skyrocketed, and it's so funny. Like I said, it's so synonymous that I kid you not, I use this trick with every girl I've ever dated. if I mention that I just love Pokemon, they're like, "Oh my god, that's so
I love
Pikachu!"
Pikachu.
Yeah, and Pikachu's always the first thing that comes to every girl I've ever talked to, and it gives me like brownie points because they're like, "Oh my god!" It's like, yeah, it's
Well, that means you're a nice, sincere guy. You know,
Yeah.
you like Pokemon. You're just a complete jerk. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. So I feel like, again, I like seeing that people know about it, regardless of age, culture, whatever. And so I think personally at this Pokemon Direct, I think we're going to get a lot of mobile updates for Pokemon Unite, Masters EX, all this crap. I personally hope that they give us, rather than a spin-off to a multiplayer game, I hope they tease Gen.
So, question for you: do you think Niantic is getting kind of sick of Pokemon? Because weren't they announcing that other game that's not a Pokemon game?
So they did, and it completely failed. I think they did a hot Harry Potter AR game, and they did one other one. They both failed completely.
Didn't they have another game that was on the horizon, or no?
Yeah, I think they did. But bigger news, because you brought this up, Niantic is now considering selling their entire gaming division to Saudi Arabia.
What?
Yes, this just came out, and that would include Pokemon Go.
I thought that was also fake news.
No, it's not, and it's very troublesome because all the GPS and data, location data that they've collected on that
The whole world
will go to Saudi Arabia. Like, it's just not
But,
good.
What does that mean? Like, if they sell their gaming division to Saudi Arabia, does that mean those developers still making the games? Is it just like a change of ownership, or is it really like we don't want to make these games anymore? We're out of here.
Yeah, I really don't know.
That's kind of a huge shakeup because like that's a huge moneymaker.
Well, it's weird because you're right. It's such a huge moneymaker that year over year, it must just be printing money with little maintenance, unless they really think that the maintenance is so much now that they're like, we can't handle it because it keeps growing and expanding. Or maybe it's the juice is no longer worth the squeeze. That is very telling to me because I thought for sure that was just printing money without you having to do. It's like Apex Legends where they're like, we don't need people to maintain this game anymore, but it prints money. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what the? So I'm kind of confused that they're even considering that.
I try to put myself in their shoes, and I just feel like if I was working on the same type of project for like 20 years, like I would get kind of sick of it. You know, like I feel like even if you're the biggest Pokemon fanboy, like after 20 years of just Pokemon, you might want to try something different.
But like, here's the thing: Niantic hasn't been in that space for long. So Pokemon Go started 5 years ago, 6 maybe. And maybe where I can see it is their investment was so low. Let's say,
but Niantic is different than that's Game Freak.
That's Game Freak.
Yeah.
So with Niantic, let's say they spent 20 million making Pokemon Go. Now they're valuing it at 3.5 billion. So they're probably saying we'll take all the money. And it sets the owners up for life, in my opinion. Which is why I think that's why they're doing it.
Did Niantic make the other like Pokemon things, like Pokemon Sleep and all that type of stuff?
No, they did not.
They didn't. Okay.
I don't think so. I think those were in house by Pokemon Company and Game Freak.
I see.
So it's interesting because Niantic came out of nowhere. It was just a weird partnership.
Well, do you see Game Freak ever getting sick of making Pokemon?
Yes. So they basically already, I don't know if you know this, Game Freak announced a new game last year.
So that's what I was getting mixed up with. That's the game I was thinking like, and that game looked totally different than Pokemon.
Yeah. So they've actually announced 2 new games. One was a new RPG that looked kid-friendly. They actually had gameplay of it, and I have no idea what happened to that game, and I don't know if it's ever coming out. The second one is they showed artwork of a new, like, it looked like a samurai game.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
They're basically like, we want to start exploring different things because we've been so stuck to this one.
Yeah, like that's franchise. A lot of Pokemon. I mean, just think about how many Pokemon designs they've made. They've made so many Pokemon.
And it's such a huge international effort because they need so many people to help them design new Pokemon. Like, what is this going to go on for 30 years? Like, I get you're milking it, but like at a certain point, you can't keep doing this.
Yeah, how many Pokemon are you going to end up with? Like 5,000?
Yeah. And you keep retelling the same story over and over again. Like, it's not... You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like the same classic story from generation to generation.
Yeah, so I just think, overall, I'm excited for the Direct just to see gameplay of PLZA. I hope we get a tease for Gen 10. I don't think we will, but it would be nice to see that too. I didn't
even realize we're already on Gen 10.
Yeah, Gen 10 should be coming out next year. And then, lastly, I just want them to fucking remake some old Pokemon games. Why can't I still play the old games on my Switch? What the is going on?
I mean, I tried to get into Black and White, and I couldn't. So I know you love Black and White, so I actually hope they remake Black and White just like they remade Diamond and Pearl and all of those. I'm super biased. Like, I am as old school as it gets, and I freaking love the first 3. I love Fire Red and Leaf Green. Those are like some of my favorite games of all time. And there is actually not many games that I will continue to replay. Now that I think about it, actually, the 2 games that I have replayed endlessly are like Halo 3 and Pokemon Fire Red. I have played so much Pokemon Fire Red.
You know what's funny? The best Pokemon games aren't the original games, it's the remakes. Fire Red and Leaf Green are remakes of Red and Blue. You got Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which are remakes of Ruby and Sapphire.
Can you play those? You can't play those on the Switch, can you?
No, you can only play them.
That's so annoying because I love Ruby and Emerald, right?
Yeah.
And I love that so much. So, oh man,
Yeah.
I missed that because I never had a DS.
Yeah, exactly. And then Heart Gold and Soul Silver are considered the best version of Gold and Silver, and
they're also DS.
And they're also DS. It's so fun. Dude. If you go on eBay right now, a used copy of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, $300 used without the case.
Why did you sell yours?
I know. I was a stupid kid that had no money, you know. So I'm so pissed that, again, this is not Nintendo's fault. It's the Pokemon Company gating this. Please I will buy every single copy, $70 each. I don't give a. Just release it, port it over, emulate it, so I can start playing. I don't want to pay $300 for a used copy of a game. It's ridiculous. So, again, I just want to see an announcement of some.
And I was just thinking about it. Like, I know they made like Let's Go, like a Pikachu.
Oh yeah, that's another remake of Yellow.
That was essentially a remake of that, you know.
Yeah.
But man, like, to me, that wasn't the same as Fire Red and Leaf Green. I know it's super biased, but I would love to see like a 3D high def version of that.
Oh
and if they're not going to do that because that's boring for them, even if they just remade the second or the third one,
I would love for them to remake them. You know.
And you know what I was just actually thinking while you were talking? I would love to have a remake of Pokemon Stadium.
Oh my god, that's what I was thinking.
Why have they not made that? So, they made new Pokemon Stadium. Why don't they make a Pokemon Stadium come back?
So here's the thing.
What if they announce that?
So that's the rumor. The rumor is people think that this codename Synapse could be like a Pokemon Battle Revolution / Stadium type of game, which I'd be happy. Don't get me wrong, but I want to see more than Stadium. I want to see Pokemon Coliseum and Gale of Darkness. Those were the two GameCube games that came out that were RPGs. That while they weren't critically received well, they were so fun.
Oh, people love them, yeah.
I love them. So I would actually want to see newer sequels to them or remakes of them in some sense too. Or just give them on NSO. Please let me play them that way too. So that's all I have to say about Pokemon. I
feel like you could talk about Pokemon for all day. You love Pokemon.
So I'm hyped. 2 more days. So yeah, there's a couple shows I just want to really quickly talk about here since we're on the topic and we've talked about this a little earlier. One, I just want to start Dragon Ball Daima. I
did not watch all of it, but I did catch up a little bit. You know, while I was waiting for my haircut, I was kind of fast forwarding through the last couple episodes.
Okay, so what have you seen to start?
So I know he's spoilers. I know he goes Super Saiyan 4 and then he becomes an adult and then he's Super Saiyan 4. But then I don't think they showed him fighting as an adult in Super Saiyan 4.
Not yet. So
that's next episode, right?
Next episode, it's the last episode, and we'll see what happens. I don't know if they're confused. They kept teasing the fusion bug.
Yeah, they have a bug, right?
And they're not fusing. So will they fuse as well, or will Goku just beat him as a Super Saiyan 4? Also, canon. Why the fuck has he never gone Super Saiyan 4?
I mean, I'm imagining, like, and I think I read an article about this, and they were saying that, you know, like, Super Saiyan God is, like, God Ki, so, like, this is Demon Ki. So, he can only use it in the Demon realm.
So that could make sense. So I think,
but then, like, technically, like, you know, after they see Beerus, like, why doesn't anyone make a concept?
Comment.
Oh yeah, maybe you should use your Demon Ki.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm saying. So again, the way they should portray this was Neva, which is the Namekian that resides in the Demon world, kind of unlocks Super Saiyan 4 for him, and then they do the classic thing. He's like, "Hey, here's Super Saiyan 1. Here's 2. Here's 3." What he did with Boo, he goes, "Here's 1 more. Here's a bonus." And I'm like, "Okay, that was sick," but just. How do you mention this going forward? I don't know if they're going to bring back Super.
And how is that fusion going to work? Because, like, is Vegeta also going to get a Super Saiyan 4 to have a Super Saiyan 4 fusion? Or, like, is he going to be like a 4 with a 3?
So Daima definitely feels like a complete remake of GT. They basically copied 1-for-1 GT. If they're going to do it, they would have to give Vegeta Super Saiyan 4, then they fuse to make Gogeta Super Saiyan 4, which there's not enough time. You only have 23 minutes left in this last episode.
That's not going to happen.
So, in my opinion, it's going to be one of two things. Goku's going to distract him long enough so that Piccolo... they just found out that if you hit someone in the back of the head 3 times...
Which is like a weird way of beating a villain, you know? It doesn't seem as fulfilling.
That's how Akira has always been. A lot of his portrayals of different things. He's always done stupid gags where it's always been dumb.
Yeah, I feel like with Daima, he wasn't going for the vibe of, like, Dragon Ball Z. You know, like, and, like, now that we're at the end, like, you know, I kind of wish this was, like, the 4th arc of, like, Dragon Ball
I do too.
You know?
I do too.
And, like, to me, it's, like, a tonal difference, you know? Because, like, it's a little more funny and humorous and more gaggy than it is, like,
serious
and epic. Because, like, that's how Dragon Ball Z felt. Like, there was real tension, like, how are we going to beat this person?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, so it's funny. I have some more to say about this because, I don't know, as you're scrubbing through the episode, did you also see Vegeta adult go Super Saiyan 3? So that was cool. The way he fought looked beautiful, but he obviously runs out of stamina and he can't, hold it up. So the interview that just came out from Akira's producers or editors yesterday, literally yesterday, goes, "Hey, did you know that Akira wanted to end the show after the Cell Saga?" "Oh, okay. Those were always rumors, but they finally confirmed it." And they go, "Yeah, Akira had this weird problem where he would just basically say he would get so bored and tired of his writing. He'd be like, oh yeah, instead of having the climactic battle at the very end, he would throw it in right away at the beginning. That's why he had Goku versus Cell, because he was bored. Then he threw in out of left field Gohan, which he was never planning to do. Then he got so bored of Gohan, he's like, I want to switch over to something else. And so he wasn't ever planning to end it the way it ended with Gohan killing
That's so
Cell.
funny.
And then on top of that, he's like, I was done. They basically confirmed Akira was done with the show. The editors had to convince him to keep going on. So when he did the whole Buu saga, he was bored out of his mind. He's like, I never planned for this shit. So he just kept throwing shit left and right. And you notice that because...
And I think in a weird way, like, that's kind of why the show worked. Because it was so unpredictable. It was like, why is he a chocolate?
Yeah. Why is he a chocolate? Why is... Okay, you get a fusion, Go Tanks, Super Saiyan 3. This bitch gets defeated.
He said he's fat.
He said, yeah, he's fat. Then he gets defeated. Then you give Gohan a new form.
Now that I realize that he was just throwing things at the wall at that point. And it's so funny that, like, to me that was a vibe. It totally worked. It
really was. It really worked in that realm of shit. But then he makes Gohan, Ultimate Gohan, who then gets defeated immediately, only for a fusion to come born out of that, and then that gets gone. That's gone out of nowhere. It's like, what is going on? So it puts a lot more into perspective where he was just like, guys, I never...
But sometimes in an ironic way, like, that's how you get your best ideas. Because, like, like, some of the stories I've been working on, like, I tried so hard to make, like, my spy thriller work, and I was like, man, I'm always rewriting this. Mm-hmm. And it just, like, never feels like it hits the mark. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'll make a YA. I'm kind of bored, you know? And then, like, one of, like, my writing pals was like, just lean into the weirdness. So weird story, just lean into it. So I was like, screw it. I was like, oh, are they kind of acting like Bleach characters? All right, let's do it. And then, like, at another point, I was like, wouldn't it be funny if this character was a squirrel? And I was like, I'll make the character a squirrel. And so, like, I was just coming up with these, like, wacky ideas and just throwing it on a wall and, like, seeing what sticks. And, like, that is what kept it engaging for me. And, like, for me, like, because I was having fun, like, now when I'm editing the story, like, I feel like when you do that, then you need a good editor, because then I'm like, oh my God, like, how am I making all these disparate ideas, like, fit together, right? Because now it just feels like a bunch of, like, Jenga pieces or, like, puzzle pieces all together. But the upside to, like, doing something like that is, like, to me, that project actually seemed a lot more fun than, like, some of the other ones because, like, it wasn't so serious,
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. So, like, there is this weird element to it. The element of surprise is, like, what can produce some of the greatest work that you've ever done. You never know. And I think, like, the fact that Akira's gone now and that he's now given us, he's made canon Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, Super Saiyan 4 Goku. Like, man, if anything, it was like, I love it. Like, I thought Daima was so slow when it started, and I'm like, what is this really? Do I care about it? I wasn't even hyped when it came out. And the fact that, fine, the last 3 episodes have been this good, it feels more like a movie to me rather than a series villain.
Exactly.
But I will take it. I'll take whatever.
I mean, I kind of feel like at this point it was fan service. I feel like this really was, cleaning up some plot holes and elaborating on some things and things like that, and then it was fan service.
Yeah, and it was. And now, look, if this is the last thing we were gonna get from him, he didn't say let's have a 60 episode arc of making Dragon Ball Z like the craziest thing ever. He's like, Daima's like, well, give them what they want. It's been years. Let's just do it.
I mean, I do wonder about what the future of Dragon Ball is going to be like at this point, But at the same point, like, Dragon Ball has been such an influential work for such a long period of time. Like, I'm satisfied, Like, it's meant so much to so many different people. Yeah. And, like, like, to me, Super was overall a disappointment, but there was parts of it that were promising, and, like, I did end up liking Jiren, and like kind of how that went down. And I think some of the newer arcs, like, people are saying are a lot better. And then I think, like, they were ending in a place that was, like, getting really fascinating with, like, all the crazy warriors and stuff like that. So I imagine a lot of the future of Dragon Ball, like, is they're probably just going to make these into, like, the TV show, right?
But that's the question. Like, that was the obvious choice, but now with Akira gone and you're passing this on to the protege, like, can he do it? Sure, but they had so much, like, influence from Akira. So even in the new manga chapters that haven't been animated, it was still Akira coming up with the outline, and then he's like, okay, to his protege, flesh it out. But he didn't come up with the ideas first. It was always Akira. He's like,
Yeah.
I give you the skeleton, the framework, you got to run with it. So if they want to do it, they're going to be very careful because they have to fit within the
it's
story.
kind of the same thing with everything. It's like, how closely do you stick with the old works? Like, at what point you like kind of try and reinvent some stuff? I would kind of argue that we've gotten so much from Akira. May he rest in peace. Like, at this point, I'm okay with the next chapter.
I am
like,
too. Even if
I'm
it
okay
deviated.
with like, if the next person comes and obviously they're not Akira and they can never be Akira, they're like just trying to do their own thing.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
And I know like this is something I think me and you have a difference in opinions of, pretty strong one, but like Linkin Park, like I know you don't like that new album.
Leave that one back in here.
I know you don't like that new album, but I really enjoyed the new album, and because to me, I'm like, no one is going to be Chester Bennington. And like the fact that like we're making some Linkin Park music, but it's like a new generation or like a new like vibe. I'm cool with that, because I can have that like divide,
Yeah, the idea itself.
And so like whatever Dragon Ball happens, like I would hope that like they actually go through with Super, because I really do want to see some of that stuff animated, because I'm not a big manga reader. But after that, like I'm kind of open to them doing things differently.
Well, see, here's the weird part, and I'll say this: I think where they might benefit from it is the last 2 arcs in the manga were so good. It felt like the old Dragon Ball Z Cell Saga, Buu Saga stuff to me. That I'm again, even though Akira came up with character designs and the skeletal framework, it was his protege that actually fleshed out the story and said, "Let's bring it back to the roots of what this once was."
And also, like, there has been some crazy power creep, and I feel like Akira can sometimes be bad with that crazy power creep.
I agree, and I think if you put that aside, if you can give me a well-maintained arc that like builds tension, so that it doesn't go from 0 to 103 episodes like Daima did. Dude, that's what's more engaging about. Like, there's so much more that can be done with the show. It can be so much more serious. We've seen it. So I just feel like maybe this could be a good thing. Not his death, just the fact that the torch is now.
But I get what you mean, because like I feel like with other media that's like so beloved, like if that creator is still around or it's a different studio or this like that, then like it's really hard to like create that separation in your mind, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think of Halo, right? Like and because Bungie just doesn't make Halo anymore, and then it's 343, like it's really hard in your mind to like get kind of a catharsis and moving on, and kind of a resolution, and for this, like I think after you pass through like just the shock and like the surprise and worrying about the future of your franchise, and after you process all those emotions, you're like, I'm okay with like the next chapter, and for some people, for some things it's like more jarring than others, like with Linkin Park, like with Chester's suicide, that was so jarring. Like it took like 8-9 years for people to start healing, and even now like people are still healing. And so with Dragon Ball, with like Akira's like death, like that's so shocking, but after people have kind of like moved through their stages of grief, right, like then I think like the idea of something new, right, is like more palatable.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment. And I'm like, again, I'm excited. I just hope they don't say that this is it, we're done forever. It would be
I just can't see that. Dragon Ball is such a like iconic like thing for Japan. Like I just Well,
so if you scrubbed the episode, you saw him powering up to Adult Super Saiyan 4, right? You heard Goku screaming, right? Dude, the actor is 88 years old. Can you fucking believe that she's still able to do something like that? Yeah. Like that's also iconic. The fact that the actor is still doing that. So yeah, I'm just excited in general. I think the series will end on a bang now. And it's going to suck because we have no idea when it's going to come back again. In fact, look, they did announce, basically confirmed that Daima was in production for 5 years.
Wow.
And it's only 20 episodes.
Man, these shows take forever to make. I did not realize how long they take.
But think about it. To put a lot of love and care, compared to the very first 20, 30 episodes of Super, which were ass, right?
Oh, man. Some of those, like if you freeze some of those frames, they're so bad.
So, again, I'm mad and I'm not. I'm glad they took their time to think about what they wanted to do, and they gave us this. 5 years, ridiculous. It's becoming like the video games industry at this point. So I don't know. I can't complain. I'm bitching about a lot because I want my cake and I want to eat it too. It's like I want it now, but whatever. So there was that. Besides that, I do want to talk really quickly about 2 other shows. First of all, Rings of Power. So let me.
I'm happy you started with that one, because let's get the bad out of the way. Yeah, you finally finished it.
I finally finished it.
You actually saw the final.
Okay. There was one badass moment in this show. I'm not gonna lie, and I want to talk
spoilers for anyone, you know, but at this point, if you were gonna watch it, you would have watched it by now.
Yeah. First of all, the show was ass. Like second season, by far. Season 1 was amazing, season 2, complete ass. But the reason I give this some points, like I'd give season 2 like objectively like 4 out of 10.
That's better. Didn't you tell me it was a 2
It
the other
was.
day?
It was 2, but because of one line that gave it 2 points, like legit. And this was when finally Celebrimbor realizes he's being tricked, okay? And he's like, wait a minute, this mouse keeps going back and forth. Something is going on. Something's wrong here. And he finally realizes, like, he was being tricked by Sauron. And Sauron comes up to him, and Celebrimbor's like, the rings aren't meant for you. And he's like, what are you talking about? He turns around, he stabs him with a spear, and he goes, I am the creator. I am the master. And Celebrimbor stabbed, lifted up, and goes, no. He's like, you're powerless. You are Sauron, Lord of the Rings. And the way he said it was so badass because it put everything into perspective. He's like, you are a lord, but you're no more than that. You think that under Morgoth's like shadow, you are now meant to be something bigger, and you treat yourself someone so different, and you're trying to be better than Morgoth. In reality, you're no different than he is, and you're just the Lord of the Rings, and the rings really aren't as meaningful as you think they are. Like, they're not going to change the world,
Yeah.
even though they're doing some good things. So I thought that one was so badass. He's like, you're powerless, Sauron, Lord of the Rings. And again, it's a little cringe when it's like, it's the title of the goddamn movie show.
I guess I never really paid that much attention to that line, but I see what you're coming from, yeah.
Yeah, so that brought up, I was like, wow, what an epic moment.
So I guess maybe for me, like, and I know we've talked about it, I really thought season 2 was forgettable, and I enjoyed season 1 more, but maybe I overhyped him, but I really did think the actor did a great job with Sauron.
No, the
acting.
And
I felt like, man, like, I felt like the actor for some of the other characters maybe weren't the best, and maybe reflection of the lines or things like that, but man, I really felt like that. I don't know who he was, but he just portrayed Sauron so well, and I was like, man, he is a good villain.
Well, I had to Google a lot because I had to understand who in Lord of the Rings, the films, like in the Third Age, were related to these characters in the Second Age. I was like, okay, so Aragorn is basically the descendant of this dude and this dude, and
they're the people in the beginning of Lord of the Rings.
Right. And Elrond obviously took care of Aragorn, and he's now here, and then he kisses Gladriel, so I guess he was only doing that.
Drove people insane.
I was like...
So if you know what happens in the books and stuff like that, that really drove people insane because she's married.
She's married,
and so
maybe he only did it to give her the...
I mean, I understand why they did it in the show, but like a lot of those creative decisions they made, they don't...
It was almost fan service.
Yeah, and they don't really fit. I wouldn't even say it was fan service, because like fan service is like how we think of anime fan service, but I don't think the fans are happy to see that, because if the Lord of the Rings fan, what they want is 100% authenticity to the original vision of Tolkien, because Tolkien basically said, like, don't change anything that I do, you know? And I get, like, you know, the problem with this is, like, with Amazon, they are kind of constrained because they pretty much can only use, like, the lore that comes from, like, I believe the trilogy and not from the Silmarillion, and, like, the Silmarillion, all of this stuff is coming from. So they do kind of have to make up a lot of stuff.
Obviously. Yeah.
So I understand that challenge, but overall, like, I'm just not feeling it, you know? Like, most of the characters I didn't really care for. I didn't really care where the stories were going. Most of the character arcs, I couldn't even tell you where they ended.
Yeah, literally.
You know, for the first season, like, I really loved the relationship between Elrond and that dwarf, right? Yeah. And that was one of the best parts of the first season, and that wasn't expanded on. So it's like the strengths that you have from the first season are gone. The only thing...
he goes to the dwarf and says, I need you. And he goes, he'll show up. And it's like, bro, you had literally no relationship the second season, and you expect him to show up. And you don't even know what he's dealing with. You didn't even ask him what his father is going through.
So for all those reasons, like, man, this sucks. But for me, like, the reason I liked, you know, season 2, the only part I liked about it was just Sauron, because I was tricked. Like, in the first season, like, I was able to kind of guesstimate that, like, that was Sauron.
I wasn't.
You know, at a certain point. And I think maybe that's because I was watching so much commentary and stuff like that and reaction videos. And then I was like, I kind of saw that coming, but I could totally see how you wouldn't see that coming.
Yeah, I didn't see that. That was like such a shock.
But I was actually tricked, because I thought the writers were going for the perspective that Sauron actually considered, like, going good, and then he went bad. And then it was only in this season that I realized, oh my God, Sauron is playing everybody, including the reader, like the watcher, right? In that, like, he gives you what you want, but in doing so, he gets power over you. And I'm like, that is such a interesting villain concept, right? And it's so manipulative. How many villains do you know that will, like, basically say, it's like the devil. It's like, this is what you want, take it. but in taking
It
this,
costs.
I will own you.
Yeah.
And it's not obvious how he'll own you. And so I just feel like that is an interesting concept for a villain.
It's an interesting concept. They started off great. The first episode where they continue a story. So they show him becoming like that
Black Blob.
Black
Oh,
Blob
I thought
to
that was
the,
good,
to
yeah.
the human. And then he meets the people of the Southland. And then he travels with the old guy that kind of convinces them, like, hey, you could be a good person. I don't even know who. He goes with them on a ship. And then he goes, the guy's like, oh, I think he didn't even have a son. So he's like treating him like his own son or something like that. And then as the ship bursts with a bunch of water, he's like, oh, you're going to save me, right? He's like, nah. He's like, fuck that. He's like, get out of here. And I thought that was great.
I thought it was so good because I was like, oh, man. In the first season, you were playing with the moral ambiguity of Sauron. Is like, are we doing a redemption for like Sauron, who is all bad? Yeah. I feel like that was making everyone's head explode because like all Lord of the Rings fans were like, how can you try to humanize and make Sauron go good? And I thought that was a great place to start. Be like, nope, psych, he's tricking you because everyone wants to see a redemption story for a bad guy. But nope, he's not giving a redemption story for a bad guy. He knows that that's what people want, right? Because they want to root for the underdog, but really he just wants to own everything.
Well, that goes back to your point of he tricked the old guy because the old guy always wanted a son or someone to he could like teach and he goes, I'll give you that, psych, and then I'm going to steal your medallion and lie to people to say I was.
Like, this is why I think like writing for that show is inconsistent because like now it puts into perspective that like what Galadriel always wanted was to redeem somebody, right? But like if the show was really taking that writing to the next level, like we wouldn't have to think about why does Galadriel want to redeem someone. We would know from her backstory where she failed to redeem somebody, right? And maybe that's connected to her brother, maybe it's not. Like that would be better connected, you know? And so now like I can like for instance like I can see that Celebrimbor wants to be really successful with what he makes, and that's how Sauron owned him. But how did Sauron own Galadriel? Like, what is it that's inherent to her nature that makes her need to redeem others? It's not clear, you know?
Not clear at all.
And so that's where, like, the writing suffers. It's a good idea, you know, but it's not executed as well as it could be.
Yeah. Again, interesting stuff. It's weird to me that she meets Sauron in episode 7 or 8, right after the war. Essentially, Adar is basically dead. He's betrayed. And then she's like, this was all part of your plan, Sauron. And Sauron's like, you're giving me too much credit. It's like breaking the fourth wall thing. He's like, this bitch thinks I'm that smart. It's like, not really. It just happened to work out this way. He's literally telling the audience, too, the same thing. He's like, Galadriel, not everything is part of my fucking plan. Like, that I thought was actually really dumb for them to kind of show. It just didn't really make sense. Because Galadriel was so obsessed.
Because you want him to seem like he is the master manipulator. Yeah. You know? I get your point. I guess I didn't catch that when I saw that, but that does seem at odds with what you're trying to sell about Sauron and his villainy. So, you know, to me, that's why, like, I'm disappointed in the show. Like, I'm not angry at the show. I'm disappointed because it's like, man, I really was like, man, Sauron is a cool villain. And, you know, it's like, in the trilogy, you're like, man, Sauron is evil. But you don't really know his evil because you just see the effects of his evil, but you don't really see him as a person and how he got to those effects. But in this show, like showing the difference between someone who just wants to like destroy, which is like Morgoth, versus Sauron, like someone who wants to control and enslave, right? And like that is something that's so interesting to toy with. And it was building up to a good point, and you had like the perfect actor for it. And you know, I just feel like the other parts of the show just did not come together. Yeah. And like if every other part of the show is like dragging the show down, like one part is not going to be enough.
And it's not going to be enough. Like the orcs, or like I like to call them the Uruks because that's their native tongue, whatever they call the orcs. Why did they all of a sudden just betray Adar? It's not even clear to me. It's not like
because all of a sudden, and this is what it means. Like the audience needs to know the rules and how they're established. And if all of a sudden, like you know, Sauron is so powerful, he can just command the orcs now, but he couldn't command them before.
It's like,
you know, then people are going to be like...
Yeah, and he still kills some of the orcs that betrayed Adar. So it's like, okay, fine, whatever. I was kind of...
And the thing is, what they're trying to get across is the power of Sauron is the more time he spends with you, the more he gets to know your mind. And then that's how he gets to manipulate everything around you. But like, when that actually plays out in screen, it's not always as interesting as it could, because then sometimes it feels like a bit of an ass pull.
It is.
You know, where it's just like, oh, you've spent enough time with these characters, now you are the god.
So like the orcs come in, they see him kill Celebrimbor, and they're like, "Is you? Are you Sauron?" And he's like, I go by many names. What's your name? So he was trying to be empathetic and kind of be the father figure that Adar wasn't, because Adar was like now sacrificing all the kids, right? So I guess they bought into that. And then I was
or
like,
that amount of encounter was enough for him to like
just
know their minds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like those things, like then when those things happen, like it feels like it's breaking the rule of that story, and then it just seems unfair,
Yeah, it did seem unfair. And I'll get two other moments I did like. One was when Adar puts the ring of power on, and he actually starts turning into his old elf self.
That was
That
cool.
was nice. And then he goes, you know what? This isn't for me. It isn't consuming him. And he actually takes it back off and goes, this is for you, Galadriel. I can use your help.
One of the things, now that you're bringing that up, I like that too. And it made me think of one of the things I didn't like about the show, where like some characters just like automatically know it's really bad. And other characters just like automatically think it's really good. It's like very black and white. And like, you would think that for that type of show, like it's a thoughtful universe, right? Those people are thoughtful. Like there should be more moral ambiguity, And like they had flashes of that, like when they had that really old elf, and they were saying, "Hey, what should we do with the ring? Should we throw it into the ocean? What should we do?" And then there's more moral ambiguity. Like I don't know how much we should use this versus how much we shouldn't. Yeah. But then in this season, like later on, there's like people who are like, like the dwarf. Absolutely, I know this is bad. Yeah. And it's like, okay, like everyone is either 100% yay or 100% nay.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. I don't know. I another moment I liked actually, finally, because it was getting annoying, was that when the dwarf's father put the ring on, he's obsessed, and they're showing now that, again, the way Kel Rumor was tricked, but fine, you want to say deceit, whatever it did to the rings for the dwarfs, but I think they were just more susceptible, right? He finally finds that fire-breathing demon, right? And I think it was cool that his dad's finally like takes the ring off, puts it in, he's like, okay, like I have to do this. And the funniest part is like an old ass elf. He jumps in the air. It was like the most epic thing ever. He's like, and they clash swords, and then like all the it crumbles, right? I was like, okay, that was actually
that was so cool.
That was actually
so my
epic.
Point is like, if a show shows you no flashes of good or brilliance, then like you've already written off that show like very early, right? Then like you don't get as invested in it.
Yeah.
But I think the things that hurt the most are the things that are disappointed, because you feel more invested, and they have like some things that are fascinating.
Yeah.
Like I'd argue with the Halo TV show, another contentious thing, but like to me, there were some flashes in that show where like, oh man, this is kind of really cool.
Right.
Like I remember in the first season, like when essentially, who is that brute who, I forget his name. He essentially, Atriox. Like he's basically Atriox. And the chief tries to fight him, and then he hammers away and steals the artifact. I was like, oh man, it's kind of cool. Needlers are exploding people. There's some promising stuff here. And I was like, all right, it's kind of weird that they took the helmet off. But hey, they're doubling down on this. This could be kind of cool, depending on where they take it. And so then there was like those flashes where it was getting interesting, right? But then I felt like the writers just like went back to like the same generic, stuff where it's like, the really like tried and true like generic military sci-fi shooter where like military brass is evil, soldiers should be able to do what they need to do, all of that. And it's like, to me, like that's kind of the elements of Halo 4, and like people don't really like that as much, or Halo 5. Like, this is not like even though it's a military sci-fi, type of, game, like what they really like, I don't know if you've heard of like Space Odysseys. That's what I would argue like 1, 2, and 3 are, just like Halo 1, 2, and 3, just like Star Wars, right? And so people want like a character that's larger than life. They want to be in environments that are larger than life. Like they don't want to have like essentially watching, Jack Reacher, but in like 2500, because like we've seen a lot of those elements. And then if you do those elements that we've seen in every other military shooter, but then you do them poorly, then any flashes of interesting or brilliance you had are just gone.
Which is why when I saw that moment with the dwarf's father, it was like cool, but then I'm like, it doesn't amount to anything. Yeah. The only thing that I liked is that when they showed the fire-breathing demon, wasn't that the demon that Gandalf kills in the...
Yeah, that's Balrog, yeah.
Okay, Balrog, right? Okay. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. That it was basically, it was living in the mountains underneath him the whole time with all the mithril. Like they find the mithril, I guess, but they're like, this thing has been here forever.
Yeah.
I'm like,
So I think in the books, I'm not like the biggest like Lord of the Rings scholar, but Balrog is there. He does do all that stuff to the Misty Mountains, but I think their spin on the Mithril and digging for the Mithril like is kind of their own creative twist because I think the books just leave it vague and they just say that like they dug deep enough and then there was calamity or something like that.
Okay, interesting. So maybe they added that.
But yeah, no, it's not like they were like, oh, it'd be cool for us to throw Balrog in here, for a tie-in. Like that's a thing. Like Balrog was in that mountain.
Okay, interesting.
As far as I know.
So it's okay, fine. They kept to that, but then I think Gandalf's story was so stupid in this season. Yeah.
I'm actually disappointed that it's actually Gandalf because I was actually hoping it was a blue wizard, and I was like looking into the blue wizards and I was like, oh, that's a totally interesting narrative. And I was like, nope, it's Gandalf.
Well, they did the stupid Hodor thing. So with Hodor, hold the door, Hodor. Okay, you know what they do for fucking Gandalf? The black lady walks up and is like, thank you, Gandalf. And then he gets
Gandalf.
Yeah, and then he literally gets in the house. He goes, "Oh, I guess this is my staff." And he goes, "So what's my name?" And the other guy,
Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, he goes, "You should know your name. It comes with the stuff." Blah blah blah. He goes, "I guess they're gonna call me Gandalf." I'm like, "Wait, how'd you get Gandalf from Grandalf?"
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? At least if he said, "My name is Grandalf," but no, he said Gandalf. I'm like,
definitely Hodor did it better.
Hodor did it better.
Hodor was pretty iconic.
Yeah, at least it went from he literally said the word Hodor,
and you could see why "Hold the Door" became Hodor.
Yeah,
then you could when you see Gandalf and Gandalf, you're just like, really?
Yeah, it's like. So I feel like they made that shit up. I feel like 100% they made that part up. And then the whole thing about the dark mage coming in, he's yeah, I'm just here to help my brother. And then he's like, oh, fuck you, I'm just kidding, I'm trying to help Sauron. Like, of course, obviously. Like,
I mean, the thing is, like, that can be like a place for them to really like have some creativity because there were wizards that came in and they were supposed to help, and then the blue wizards just went to the east and we don't really know what happened, and all it says is like they tried and didn't really amount to much.
Did they die? Did they live?
And the story keeps it super vague, because the way Tolkien wrote it, like he didn't write it as if like he was the creator of everything. He wrote it like a historian. He wrote it as if like he was researching Middle Earth and he was writing down the tales of Middle Earth. So just like you would write down like in the 1700s, like this happened in America, but we don't know.
Why do you write it that way?
I mean, that's why he was so genius, because like by doing that and creating his own language, it like created this like whole nother dimension of realism, because it was like the actual author is not acting like an author, he's acting like a historian. And then like to do that you have to commit, like the man created languages, you know, like he really almost treated it as if it was like a study.
Yeah,
that's why like I said I'm not a Lord of the Rings scholar, because I feel like to really understand all of that, like you have to be like a Lord of the Rings scholar, because he created a friggin' mythology,
I think it's cool. I think that the world itself is amazing. I don't know if I'm gonna like season 3 because it's about creating the One Ring now.
Yeah.
And at that point, Sauron will probably have a lot of power. So
I mean,
we'll
I think everyone was hating on the show after the first season, but for me, like I thought there was enough there in the first season that I was entertained and interested. And I was like, I want to see where this develops. And now that the second season is here, I'm like,
yeah, we'll see.
I guess I'm just comparing it to like the Halo TV show. Like after the first season, I was like, I kind of want to see where this goes. And then I saw the second season, and I would say like 90% of it, I was like, okay, yeah, I don't know if I really want to see where this goes. And then for me, I actually liked the last episode of the Halo, like the second season, and I thought it ended in an interesting place. Like spoilers, but they end up on the Halo, And so, I mean, who knows? I mean, Netflix might be picking that back up, but
we'll see. But I mean, for Lord of the Rings specifically, I think they said they're going to start filming this year. So we'll see where they get with it. I think overall, like, disappointed for sure. I actually really enjoyed season 1. I liked Galadriel was way more involved in season 1, and I know people didn't like her as much, but I personally did, and I just liked the twist ending to reveal Sauron. So to me, I just like season 1 better. But yeah, that's kind of most of what I have to say about season 2. Just not really into it. And then the last thing I just wanted to talk about was Severance. Which are you caught up?
I'm not caught up. No, the last episode I saw was still the ice.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, again, some things happen in the last episode. It's interesting when you watch it, but I think overall, like, I'm just enjoying the show because of the acting. I think more so than the story. I don't really care so much about the story. It's just the way they all interact with each other. It's so good. Like, it's weird to say it, but like Irving, Dylan, Helena, and Mark,
They have a chemistry.
not only do they have chemistry, but when they go from innie to outie and outie to innie, they're so distinct. They're almost acting like two different roles in one show. So it's just like,
It's
man,
good.
they're able to really stretch themselves to do a lot. So I think that's just captivating for me, and it's kept me coming back to the show. So yes, I'm interested in the story. I want to know what the fuck is going on at Lumen, and I want to understand what the refinement actually means. But overall, I don't even care about Mark's wife. They literally don't give a shit. It's just like every time they
To
interact,
see how they interact.
yeah, it's like, okay, they have this retreat, and then they almost kill the daughter of the sea. Like, it's really funny that like that happened, and then her
Spoilers.
and herself, who's an outie at that time, has sex with any Mark is like
Yeah.
even funnier. That because she's starting to become obsessed with him.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, for Severance, really, I just feel like the outsider on this because every single person I've talked to, and apparently I'm surprised, but everyone I know is really watching Severance, and they all love it. And I feel like I'm the only one who's like, I don't really like season 2. I'm not feeling it because for me, I'm like, what is driving the story forward, right? And like, why am I coming back to
I'm
watch?
thinking too much like a writer.
And so, two things. I mean, this is something that I do all the time, and I've gotten some advice not to do this, but like, I artificially like leave my reveals for much later in the story. So like there's tension and people keep coming. So like there's a payoff and then they'll finally like get the reveal. But at this point, how many hours have I been watching Severance? And how much have I really learned about the world of Severance? And I'm just like, if I'm watching this to like learn about the mystery of Severance and like why the world is the way the world is and why things are happening the way it is, it's like I need more, like I just feel like it's dragging and I need more reveals. And the people I'm talking to, the reason they like the show is like it's almost like they're describing like a detective type show. And like people like watching detective shows because you're like figuring it out as it goes.
Well, you're figuring out with the character.
Yeah. And so I think Severance does an amazing job of that, like making you put yourself in the shoes of the character and you're like learning it just like a detective thriller is. But for me, like I kind of saw the twist coming, from the moment they were sitting at the table. So at that point, I was like, to me, this pacing is kind of slow because I felt like season 1 ended up in a really good point, and then I've done this as well sometimes, and I know a lot of shows do it. It's like season 2 happens, and you're like expecting something cataclysmic to happen because you're like, oh my god, season 1 ended in such a huge way. Like I can't even imagine the ramification of the world, and then it's like nothing's changed.
Yeah,
and then it's like you're back to square one. And I understand that like you're trying to drive home a point of the theme that like this is an office and nothing changes, and people can relate to that. But I'm just kind of like, I've already seen that, like, and I just didn't vibe with that as much. And so I'm just waiting for like the plot to move forward because for me, like after 4 episodes of season 2, I'm like, what's really happened,
for me, it's not about, again, I go back to the plot, and I think whatever they unveil about what Lumen is truly doing, it's going to be something really simple. It's going to be something where everyone overthought everything, and I'm like, the reason why they didn't want to reveal it, because if they did, they would end in one season.
And that's so true. It's more of the experience and the journey, not the destination. And I guess for me, I'm kind of waiting on the destination more. This is a total personal like peeve of mine. I don't think this is an objectively bad thing, but I just feel like a lot of people, like when they're creating these like office environments, they kind of go to the same cliches, which is like,
it's always the 1980s.
It's always the 1980s. I'm like Call of Duty Black Ops.
There's a weird obsession.
And I understand why, but like Control, like Call of Duty Black Ops, like, and I understand like that's the motif, and like especially when it's like it's really touching that like CIA like thriller type of mindset, but like I've seen that so much, and it's like obsession with I'm like, if you created a severed floor and it's such an interesting concept, like why does it have to look that way? And like from like a mental health perspective, like if the people in a severed floor are only going to live in a severed floor and only are going to know that, why is there a bunch of white everywhere? Like, and why? I mean, like, I feel like it's like artistic expression is supposed to be an analogy of like how we feel in our jobs, but like from a practical standpoint, like that would really affect their mental health. And like, why would you want to affect their mental health if they're stuck there? Like the walls don't have to all be white. Like it's doing something for the viewer, but in like the world, like why would you do that? Because that's the only thing they'll know. you could like literally make it look like a Google headquarters. You know?
Yeah, make them. Yeah, I agree.
And it's not going to
weird
affect
choice.
their workflow. If anything, it's going to make their workflow better, but
Yeah.
it's not going to like help us make the artistic vision of the show and like sell it, you know?
Yeah.
And like, look, I feel like I'm in the wrong on this choice because like clearly like the ambiance and like the scene selection and the artistic style is super successful
Yeah.
and it's iconic. And it's like, you know, without even really like doing much effort, we can just like think of the icon, you know, like the cinematography, like
Yeah.
images, and it's like in your head, like you know what that floor looks like, you know what the hallways look like, and so they've done their job really successfully, right?
Yeah, the way they shoot all of the scenes is so subtle. They sometimes have double meanings. So
Yeah.
like when they were shooting, like there's a scene with any Mark and any Helena in the office, and they were obscuring Mark, but they weren't Helena because Mark is starting to reintegrate. So it's kind of like this weird
Yeah.
subtle way of he's no longer himself, and then she's back to her any self, so you can see a clear view
Yeah.
of her. Or when she's in the
Such
bathroom,
smart decisions, yeah.
or when she comes into the bathroom and Mark had just had sex with her, and now she's back to her any self, but she's talking. You see then her image casted through the mirror, so it's almost like the Audi version of her, and they're both looking at Mark, and he's right in the middle, and he's confused because he's like, just fucked your Audi, and I'm now talking to you. I'm too scared to like. He's like, I'm confused. So it's really funny the way they do it.
And I guess with me too, like sometimes I skip through the show a little bit because it's like the episodes are so slow, and I'm just like, oh god, can we move forward? And if I skip through like 20 or 30% of the episode, I don't really lose much.
No, you're not. Definitely not.
You know, and I think that also kind of shows you about the pacing of the show. Because, like, if I like the episode that happened in the snow, I could have literally skipped like 80% of that, and literally
nothing would have happened.
It would. And so, I guess what I'm trying to get at, the word I would look at is like consequential. Like, not everything that's happening in the show feels consequential.
That's fair.
And like even the white woman, I forgot her name, like the older lady who's like obsessed with him,
Miss Colby.
like she like keeps wanting to like be a part of
human
and not, and like literally if she just made up her mind on what she wanted to do right in the beginning, how much would the show lose? Like, I understand that there is like a benefit to her like being wishy-washy and wanting to join and not join, right? That's actually like adding to the story. But with the amount of screen time you spent, you know, like how much is it really happening? Because it doesn't really feel consequential. Like, I already know this woman is weird. You know, like I'm not really like learning anything.
I'll give you that. That's a fair criticism. The way I was gonna say something, but now I'm like forgetting. But what was I gonna say?
Was it a good thing about the show?
Yeah, it was. But now I'm forgetting.
Was it the acting? Because I know you love the acting.
No, it was to the point you were making. Okay, I can't remember, but I think over where I am at with the show. Look, I think I know what I was going to say. So you made a point about the pacing, though, but you said what's happening is somewhat seems inconsequential. For me, I felt almost the same way with Lord of the Rings, like with Rings of Power, to the point where the pacing was so bad. I'm like, why am I not enjoying this show, but I'm enjoying Severance? Like, I was trying to really compare, and it's hard because it's almost like apples and oranges.
I would say, like, it's the tension, you know, because, like, in Severance, there's a lot of tension because you're just like, what is going on? And you care about the characters, you're invested, right? So there's tension because, like, you don't know what's going to happen to the character, so there's the unpredictability aspect. You don't know what's happening in the world, so it's unpredictable. So, like, you're feeling glued because there's tension, you know? But, like, in Rings of Power, there's not a lot of tension,
and
you know?
I think that's what, like, did it because we just, you know, I gave you the statistic the other day, but Severance just surpassed Ted Lasso as the most viewed show on Apple TV. And I think if they could, like, harp on anything, and they were like, what do we need to do to get people to watch the show? And they did, and they got the tension right, but like you said, the things the decisions are inconsequential, they can live with that.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, to me, like, the fact that, like, there's parts of the show that are inconsequential, like, and it's, you know, to me, I'm like, let's just get to the point where, like, the things that happen in the show have, like, a huge impact. Like, if Audi and Innie, Mark are now reintegrated or whatever, like, when is that going to have consequences on the, you know? Like, for this show, it's working, and I guess I really have to analyze and think more why it's working. Because in a way, it's almost feeding into the tension. Like, they've done it in such a way that even though things are feeling inconsequential, to me, it's adding to the tension of, oh my God, what's going to happen? It's almost like Game of Thrones, where sometimes things will feel inconsequential, but it's kind of adding off. And I would just say, you need to have a payoff eventually.
There's got to be
And
eventually
like
payoff.
in the
Like,
first season, there was a good payoff. So if you don't have a good payoff at the end of
yeah, but
season
two
2,
minutes,
people are going to be like,
yeah.
did anything change really from the beginning of the season to the end of
So
the
I think
season?
they're going to ramp up because the season 1 had the same problem. It didn't ramp up until like the last 3 episodes, and then the end, that payoff was so great because when they do have the overtime contingency happen, he's staring at a picture, he's like, wait, that's my wife, and she's like, wait, you're Innie Mark? That's like, she's alive. It's like,
That
okay,
was so well done.
it's so well done, and I think they're going to have a moment like this. But what I would say to that is, there's this moment of tension specifically in the last episode. So I can't remember if you've seen this one or not, but I think it's in the last episode. He starts to continue to reintegrate while he's back in Lumen. He's like, what's going on? And he starts to cough. He ends up having, well, fuck, he didn't watch the episode. Okay, ends up having sex again, but this time with Innie Helena, okay, in the office. After that, his nose starts bleeding again. He's like, what the fuck? So he goes to the nurse's office with the Asian girl, the intern. Okay, you find out she's an intern, by the way. She's not Milechek's boss. She's a fucking intern. And she has a fellowship. And then she's like taking care of him. She's like, hey, your blood pressure's kind of high. It was weird. Has anything been going on? He's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And then all of a sudden, again, the scenes start flashing. And then he goes, wait, where am I? And then it's flashing between 2 scenes. Him being with Aragabi, the African American lady that's been experimenting on him. And then him with at Lumen with the girl that has the fellowship. And he's like, I can't now perceive where I'm at. And so then they cut away immediately, and you don't know what happened if the Asian girl knows he's been reintegrating. And it's how did you get back home? So that tension again was like, what's going to happen the next time you're at Lumen?
Yeah, I feel like the show is really good at like the tension,
Yeah,
like what's going to happen, and I think even the things that are feeling like they're inconsequential, like in the broader scope, they are still feeling consequential because it's just kind of adding to the tension.
Well, sorry, and one other thing to add to that, as soon as that happens, he's back at home. He's, how did I get here? He goes to a diner to go eat, and guess who visits him? Audi Helena. And he's like, that's never happened. And then it's like, is she visiting him because he had this weird breakdown at work?
And she knows, yeah.
And she knows, or is she just obsessed with him? And it leaves it vague enough that it's like, oh shit.
So kind of speaking about Severance, and I don't know if they've answered this before, but when I was talking to, our barber,
has he seen Severance?
Yeah, he loves Severance.
What?
And he was telling me that, one thing that he noticed was when, who's that guy who, Irving? I think it was Irving, right?
Yeah.
Like
the game one.
Yeah, like Irving realized like really early on that like there was something wrong with Helena.
Yeah, the way she described her story.
But he's like, he was always suspicious. He was like, just based off of how she described this, the story, like how did he figure out that Helena was actually as important as she was? Because he was like, if Helena wasn't as important as she was, and he just started drowning her, then wouldn't Milchek just say, just drown her, right? He wouldn't intervene. So like Irving would only do something that drastic only if he knew that she was as important as she was, And you could make the argument that, well, only that someone that important could show up as an innie when they're really an outie. But he was convinced that when you take that with that phone call that he was making, that there's probably higher forces at play, and that probably the outie Irving has been connected to bigger players.
So here's the funny thing. Now, since you missed the last episode, they delve a little further into that. Irving ends up having dinner with Audi Burt, the guy that he started to fall in love with. And when he goes there, something happens. 2 things. One is someone breaks into his house, to Irving's house. They find out he has a suitcase full of fucking shit. They open it up, and he's been keeping notes on everyone at Lumen. And they're like, how does his Audi have these notes? So that's weird. That's strange. He must be talking to someone else that has connects. Second of all, he's talking to Bert at his house. He meets Bert's partner, gay partner. They're all talking, and all of a sudden they're having wine. And his partner's like, don't you remember when you were at Lumen 20 years ago? And everyone's like, 20 years ago? He goes, you told me you joined 12 years ago. That's when the severance procedure first took place. 20 years ago. And Bert's like, oh, no. Like, he's just drunk. Don't listen to him. It's like, okay, so 2 things are going on at once here. Irving knows more than he's letting on to believe on the outside world. And Bert's also probably been lying too. And I don't think Bert was ever severed.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
That's interesting. I mean, now that we've been talking about it, I feel like the hook with Severance is it's basically a detective show without a detective.
Yeah, without a detective.
And like you're in the middle of the investigation, and everyone is kind of figuring things out because it's a very suspicious place to be. and you're figuring it out alongside with them, but there is no detective
I
leading the
kind of like
charge.
that though.
And that's kind of unique. You know,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of things that I can think of that are like that, you know? And so it's like filling a niche that we all like, which is like the detective show, but in like a way that's different because you don't have like a Jack Reacher or like somebody else,
Well,
you know, like, or, you know, like Sherlock Holmes leading the way. And so then there's more tension. Because if you know, like Sherlock Holmes was on the case, you know it's going to get sorted out eventually.
maybe, but you know what? One, I guess, form of medium or art that did it right was Batman, the latest one. Even though you know he's a quote unquote detective, the
I
whole
think it's kind of a deranged directive.
well, not just that. The whole movie, the recent one, he's basically you're playing along with the Riddler, and you're going from riddle to riddle. And he's still like, I don't understand what's happening, and he actually doesn't solve it because Falcone dies.
Yeah.
But you're in it with Batman trying to figure it out. That
Yeah.
one actually did it really
Yeah.
well.
I mean, that's why people love detective shows because look at how important Criminal Minds is.
Right.
People love that stuff. To really feel like you're in the center of it, trying to figure it out alongside everyone because the hook is like, can you figure it out before them?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like,
And they breadcrumb it so that you can't actually figure it out before them. Because when they finally think they figure it out, like Batman, he goes, "Oh, rat with wings. That's Penguin." And Penguin's like, "That's not me." Wait a minute, but another rat with wings, like a falcon. Falcone. Oh shit! You know, it's like oh, but they breadcrumbed you enough to make you think that you knew, but you really weren't ever gonna figure it out until the end. So I think like the Batman actually did it really well, just like Severance is kind of doing it. You know, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Like you're right. It's like they're putting you in the middle of the investigation.
yeah. Oh, I gotta catch up on that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I'm gonna wait for a few more episodes to drop, and then I'll binge them.
I think it's fair. Yeah, I don't think there's any rush, but every new episode comes on Thursday, so just keep that in mind.
All right. Well, I think this is a good one, and we'll catch everyone in 2 weeks. You know, please let us know if you have any thoughts about anything. You know, we'd love to hear from you guys. What you're watching? You know, what do you think about some of our hot takes, or you know, if you guys have played out and if you agree with me. So, all right, we'll catch everyone later.
See ya.